say welcome to our kickoff session. Thank you so much for coming. So today, you've all come to the right place, I hope. It's Power to the Indie, New Frontiers in Marketing, Distribution, and Engagement. I'm going to introduce our moderator for today. You know who all our panelists are. They're going to be introducing themselves. Trish Dolman, our moderator for today, is no stranger to any of you, probably. One of Vancouver's most successful independent producers, and I'm proud to say a close friend of mine. She's been in the business for 18 years, and she's produced everything from series to feature documentaries to feature films. You name it, Trish has done it. Her most recent feature film is Hector in the Search for Happiness. You name it, you've done it. It's true.
No pornography.
No pornography, she says. Hector in the Search for Happiness, starring Simon Pegg, Rosamund Pike, Stellan Skarsgård, and Toni Collette, Jean Reno, and Christopher Plummer. It's in post right now. So without further ado, I present to you the panel. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. So as you've probably seen on the website, Power to the Indie, New Frontiers in Direct Distribution, Marketing, and Engagement. I think we all know what the current landscape is today facing feature films and independent films. So we want to hear from all these guys, what are the alternatives? What don't we know? Where can you as a filmmaker take your film and reach an audience with it? So I just wanted to go around to start off and just get everyone to introduce themselves and their companies to start. Why don't you go ahead, Julie?
Okay, hi. My name is Julie Labassiere, and I am the head of marketing at FilmViFF. And FilmViFF is a digital distributor. We have been around since about 2008. We are part of the Cinetic Sales Sloss law firm family. They are our sister companies. We specialize basically in really, really great films and getting them out to as many people as possible through transactional VOD, subscription VOD, free VOD, basically anywhere where there's an internet connection, we try and get your films out there.
Do you want to tell us a little bit, too, about yourself, your background?
Well, you don't care about me.
Yeah, we do.
The short version is I started out as an educational anthropologist, and then I decided I fell in love with Margaret Mead, and I wanted to make films, or I wanted people to see films, and then was a festival programmer for a long time. Started the LA. What used to be called the LA Independent Film Festival, which is now called the Los Angeles Film Festival. So I started with that festival and went on to Tribeca. I worked at the Writers Guild. Basically, I think if it's been in anything that's sort of behind the scenes in the film industry, I've done it. And then I left film because I got sick of it, crazy, and went and worked in music, crazy, and started to do tour marketing for bands and PR. And I think and then went back to film because I missed it, crazy. But really felt like all of those different places that I'd been, whether it was at the Writers Guild and working with writers specifically and doing sort of guild agreements, working with bands and figuring out how to promote tours pre-Facebook and social media, because I'm that old, and figuring out how to do that and doing out-of-the-box marketing, looking at posters and CDs and DVD covers and all of those things, and then doing sort of a lot of personal publicity like red carpet events and all of that has led me to be the person I am and figure out, what the best strategies are for filmmakers in terms of what they need to do themselves, and then how I can help them to get their films out there.
Great. So from cultural anthropology?
Educational
anthropology to film distribution and marketing.
Yes.
Interesting. So Jamie, can you tell us about yourself and your company, VHX?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, is this thing on? Yeah. My name is Jamie Wilkinson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of VHX. We're not a distributor per se like everyone here. We're a free web platform for publishing and selling films and video content from your own website. So the X for Y pitch that I've given to investors is Tumblr for premium video. People can kind of come in and sign up and set up a full website where they can build a mailing list and sell pre-sales and sell their work kind of directly from their site. And we've had the pleasure of working with a couple of films actually distributed by these guys we worked on. We got started with Aziz Ansari about 15 months ago. We sold his comedy special directly to fans from his own website. We had the pleasure of working with Indie Game the Movie, This American Life. We did Sound City. Most recently, we've gotten up to about 100 releases that have used our platform to sell directly to fans. And we're currently in kind of a limited beta mode, just because we sort of focus on customer service and really working closely with people and learning best practices and how to kind of best do this new thing that's happening. But it's a really exciting time. I'm really honored to be here.
Great. Is there anything we should know about your personal background?
Oh,
maybe relevant to
He's
today's
moving to
conversation?
Brooklyn.
Sure. Yeah, I'm moving to Brooklyn next month. My background, I'm a computer programmer. I've worked on lots of projects. I started a website called Know Your Meme, where we kind of documented internet culture and viral video.
I use that a lot.
Awesome.
'Cause I don't know my
Great.
stuff.
Yeah. No, it was a need, and
Yeah.
we went there. Then I met my co-founder of VHX, this guy named Casey Pugh, who worked at Vimeo for a long time, and we collaborated together and we made this crowdsourced film called Star Wars Uncut, where we chopped up the original movie and then sort of invited the internet to come recreate it. And that was kind of our first foray into the world of like film and meeting studio people in Hollywood and things like that. And that sort of led to where we are today. We sort of saw this hole in the market for doing literal, very direct distribution. It's like the artist's website, the film's website, was this horribly underused property that is extremely flexible. You can know tons about what's going on, but nobody was using it. So we wanted to build kind of a scalable model, a scalable platform where anybody could do it.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Cool. My name is Sarah Kiner. I'm the co-founder and marketing director of a company called Film Presence. We do specialized marketing and outreach for independent films. Mostly we're working on films that are gearing up towards their US theatrical premieres. So they've already been through the festival circuit and they're getting ready for that big moment. There's a wide variety of structures that we work within. So anything from like crowdsourcing tug platform launches to opening on one screen in New York to see how it does before you want to try other markets, all the way up to films like 20 Feet from Stardom that are going to play on thousands of screens. We've done the gamut. We're really curious and excited about different ways that you can engage your audience at the theater, because it's like ever challenging, but it's also the hope and dream of most people sitting in this room and most filmmakers are out there. And we're willing to try just about anything to help make that happen. My background, I studied film theory, crazy, at a liberal arts college in Minnesota, crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's going to be the word of this panel. Crazy. Are you crazy?
Probably. Yeah, I wanted to work in film distribution, even though I quite didn't understand what that meant. I was booking films on my campus. I really liked that experience and marketing those screenings, like one-offs of those screenings. And so I interned at Think Film, in fact, for Dylan, right, who was there at the time. And then I worked at Magnolia Pictures. I worked at a nonprofit called Women Make Movies. And then I started freelancing, doing this outreach, which I didn't realize I was going to start a company, but there was such a need for it that it evolved into Film Presence. And that was 4 years ago.
Thanks so much. It's funny, someone I met yesterday said, you think the industry is big, but it's not that big. So all these companies at some point worked with Women Make Movies, Think Film, it's all interconnected. So Dylan, tell us about yourself and your company.
Yeah, my name is Dylan Marchetti. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Variance Films. We just had our 5th birthday. Our job at Variance is a little weird, basically. What we figured out back in 2008 was what was happening with independent films wasn't working. The filmmakers were the last people to make any sort of money. They weren't getting any sort of say in the way their films were put out. They weren't seeing any of the positive results. And to me, that kind of seemed like bullshit. So, but we went on are we okay to curse at this panel? I curse a lot, and I'm really sorry about it.
Fuck yeah.
Okay.
I curse. I hope you guys don't mind.
There's no rating on it, but I listen to a lot of rap music, I'm sorry. The overarching theme was, okay, so with Variants, what we do is a little bit different. Every film we release, we do directly with filmmakers, occasionally with a sales company, occasionally with a video company, but usually directly for filmmakers. And we've done everything from first-time $20,000 features from a kid in Brooklyn, or someone's Harvard thesis film that turned out to be magical, all the way up to Spike Lee's last movie. We did Sound City by Dave Grohl. And we sort of bring the same thing to the table with all of them. Our job is not only to distribute the film to theaters in a way any traditional distributor would do, but also to help a filmmaker start from scratch and come up with a strategy that encompasses all of the things that these panelists specialize in. Like, who should you go with for your VOD? Because we do theatrical only. We work with partners to make sure the filmmakers get the revenue from VOD, not us. What should you do about energizing your fan base? How do you get a film out directly to fans? And like you said, we did a great thing with you guys. You guys did a great thing, I should say, on Sound City, Dave Grohl's film, where we were able to bring it directly to the people, and that's because these guys brought it directly to the people. We work with Sarah and Meryl at Film Presence a lot. Some films need more outreach than we can provide in-house. Some films need more of a base. The overarching question is, nothing works the same on every film, so 10 to 12 times a year we find a film that we love. That's the only sort of consistent thing about it, is we love the film, and we think that other people will love it too, and we put it in theaters across US and Canada. How we do that changes each time. We've played many films in this fine theater here.
I don't know if you guys are thinking this, but this is what I'm thinking listening to all of these people, is that I don't hear this conversation or these words coming out of Canadians' mouths, right? Where are the Canadian companies like this? It's really interesting. It just struck me when you guys said that. I was like, we don't have you guys saying these words. Like, we want to work with filmmakers. We want to pay attention to their films. Every film is unique. Wow. Anyhow, we'll come back to that. I just was really struck by that.
Wow,
It's a bit shocking. So basically, let's just dive in. I didn't think we needed to belabor where we are, as I said, with the state of the industry. I just want to get right into what these guys do. So Dylan, I want to go back to you because I thought you had this very interesting DIWO model. I'm only going to say the acronym so that you can explain it to us. And how did it evolve? I mean,
Absolutely, and full disclosure, I think I actually stole the acronym from somebody. I think it was Ted Hope, but he's cool. He'll let me do it. DIWO means doing it with others, and the reason we work on that sort of mantra is that DIY, for all the good things about it and for all the good things it can do, doing it yourself sometimes, in fact, I would say 99% of the time, is not the right way to go. Your time as a filmmaker is not best served cold calling people who I have lunch with. Your time as a filmmaker is not best served Google searching which theater is the best, in this weird town in Minnesota, because I have a website that I pay to get on that tells me exactly where it is, and I know the guy that books it. Reinventing the wheel from scratch every time is generally a terrible way to go about business, because you as a filmmaker, your job can't just be to make a film and then spend 4 years releasing it. The goal of everything you do as a filmmaker, theoretically, should be to be able to make your next film. Hopefully have either someone come in and say, you did such a good job on your last one, here's a big check to do it again, or at very least someone say, hey, I loved your last film, when are you doing something else? And you can, at the bare minimum, say, give me your email address, we'll let you know. Like, in this age of crowdfunding and Kickstarter, that's a huge thing. All the tools are out there, but connecting the dots from scratch is not something necessarily best served, individually 800 times a year when someone makes a film. So do it with others is take what you bring to the table as a filmmaker, which is not only the film, but the knowledge you developed when you were making it, the contacts you made if it's a documentary. I mean, you've probably lived in that world for 2 years, so you know more about it than I ever will. Bring it to the table. We'll put a bottle of wine on it. We'll get some, takeout, or we'll get on a conference call, which kind of sucks, but has to happen, and we'll chop it up. You're doing it with others. You're bringing people who are the best at what they do to come work on your film, but instead of handing it over to a giant conglomerate, you're sort of the CEO of the film distribution company for your film. You're running the show.
Can I say something about that?
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, one of the things, I think that is something that I think all of us actually really do, because we've all worked together on particular films. The one thing I will say about that is that you as a filmmaker, it is so important, vitally important, that you do your research. So when you are working with others, you need to date them for a while. Don't just assume that because, our company released Senna and you have a racing movie, or because these guys did Sound City and it's a music doc, that it's going to be automatically a perfect fit. The most important thing you can do for yourselves as a filmmaker is to do your research before you go and sign with anybody. Date a few people, do the meetings, figure out, talk to, the other thing is talk to other filmmakers. Because at the end of the day, those other filmmakers who have gone through the process are going to be the people who are going to say, you know what, I worked with that Dylan guy and it was way too much wine. Or whatever it might be. Not that I'm saying.
Like, too much awesome.
Too much wine, too much awesome, too much takeout. I don't like that kind of awesome. So if
Yeah.
but I think it's really, really, and I think it's something that's not. I go to a lot of festivals. I talk to a lot of filmmakers. It's something that people do not say enough. Do your research.
And if I may follow up that with something even more important, don't ask someone for references because they're only going to give you the top 3 films that worked. Like what I tell filmmakers looking to work with me, and I think most of these guys do the same, is you can go on my website and see every film I've ever released, and you can go on Box Office Mojo and see how much money it made in theaters. My results are sort of up there. Talk to the filmmakers where it worked, but also talk to the ones where it didn't.
Right.
Because they need to be able, and any company needs to be able to say, like, yeah, you know what? The film didn't work. Sometimes it rains on opening day. Sometimes the film isn't as good as we think it is. Sometimes the audience is, distracted by something shiny. Sometimes there's a hurricane and your opening weekend gets shut down. But you have to be able to justify as a company, and this is sort of what we work off of, and I think you guys do too. We do what we say we're going to do. The accounting's accurate down to the penny. And when we say, this is what we're going to do in the contract, we don't just say, oh, well, that's the contract. We go above and beyond. If a company can't tell you they're going to do that, then you should probably keep looking.
Date someone else.
Date someone else.
Yeah.
Date someone else.
There's a
Sleep
lot
around.
of fish in the pond.
Sarah, speaking of, is this working? Hello? No. Hello, there I am. Speaking of dating other companies, you were previously at Magnolia, a company that most people here are probably familiar with. Can you tell us what you're doing at Film Presence? How is that different from, say, what a company was like Magnolia is or was doing? And even why you left, maybe, if we're allowed to know that.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So at Magnolia, I was doing something called exhibitor relations, which is basically at the bottom of the totem pole at a distribution company, but absolutely necessary, and I learned very important information while I was doing it. That's placing trailers and posters at theaters where your film is opening. So I dealt with that. I endured that for about 1.5 years. And through that process, I came to understand the system, the chains, the theaters, why open at one theater in New York and not another, how to deal with the personalities at a certain institution to make sure that your film works in a certain way. And that's really, the only reason I left is because the job was kind of boring, but Magnolia is fantastic. So you asked about the similarities and differences between what I'm doing now and what I was doing there and what they're doing as a company. I actually think it's somewhat similar, and it tailgates off of what you were saying about doing it with others. Magnolia is a company of, 30 people, if you include home video and digital and all of that, and they're a team. They're doing it as a team. There's certain departments that fill each function. Acquisitions, marketing, publicity, booking the theaters, getting it on digital, doing the home DVD and all that stuff. And each film, and they do it a little differently for each film, but essentially it's the same thing and they just crank them out. When you guys are coming to, when it's time for you guys to distribute your film, if you don't have a Magnolia to put it out, you need to then look at what all those different spokes on the wheel are at the distribution company and assemble it and create your team. That is your own personal Magnolia. And you can do that. So I'm just a piece of that puzzle now. Film Presence is a piece of that puzzle. And in fact, I've worked, like Magnolia hires my piece of the puzzle for select films that they do. Because I give that outreach a kick in the butt. If their marketing department is putting out 2 or 3 or 4 films that month, they can't give that documentary the special attention that it needs and facilitate those group sales. But I can. So there's overlap, but it's different. And what I love about what I'm doing at Film Presence too is that it can apply to these DIY models and these smaller teams and these very intimate and awesome kick-ass teams that do like work tooth and nail. But it also applies exactly to what's happening at Radius and IFC and Magnolia, and these are all my clients too. So I think, you know, the audience engagement part of this whole thing is crucial and needs to be addressed.
So I'm curious, so Dylan has come to you to work with you, Magnolia has come to you. Why is that? I want to understand better. Why would a company like that come to you? What are you providing specifically that they can't do themselves?
Okay, an example I like to use is a film Unfinished, which is a Holocaust documentary that I did with Oscilloscope.
Good times.
Yeah, I do a lot of Holocaust outreach.
Good times.
So I took a meeting with the what was it called? Like the General Assembly, like the UN of, not the UN, what's the word I want to say? No, I met with this is a bad example now. I met with Germany, Poland, and Israel at the UN in New York to
Like a delegation?
Yes, that's
Okay.
it. Like their cultural affairs department in New York. And I had a sit-down meal with them. We had burgers. And I explained to them what it means when a film opens in a theater in New York and how the theaters work and how group sales work and how I could work with them to sell out the opening night and have them invite all of their, you know, elite people to attend. And that is something that no one at Oscilloscope in their right mind would take that lunch because they're doing 10,000 other things. Like I need to be there having that lunch and explaining to them how the film forum works. And then seeing, oh, you know, selling the tickets and making sure the invites look good and making sure there's 180 people showing up and their names are on the list. So that's the thing that the distribution company can't do.
So it's very specific, very targeted marketing, very specific to a film that's going to, like, basically a portal to an audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Now I understand.
Okay.
I get it. Because they just aren't going to take the time or don't have the resources
Yeah.
necessarily to do that. Okay, good. It's a very good segue because the next thing I wanted to start talking about were more specific projects. And Jamie, maybe you could pick one of the things that you've done and specifically talk about how that evolved and sort of kick off a discussion about specific projects and then even some of them that you've worked on together. So maybe from sort of the beginning of how you got involved in a project so people understand how a project could come to you.
Sure, well, I'll pick a project I didn't work on you guys with.
So it failed.
It's a huge success. We did a documentary recently called Bet Raise Fold, which is about the rise and fall of online poker. And this was done kind of completely outside the traditional system. And much like Indie Game the Movie, which we worked on about a year before, they organized a lot of their own theatrical runs, and they followed like a really traditional, a relatively traditional distribution windowing strategy of sort of like, you know, releasing multiple trailers over time and building up audience. And they did a theatrical tour that they self-organized, and then they had raised money on Kickstarter too, and they came to us because our platform sort of makes it really easy for them to operate a web presence where throughout that whole process they're collecting email signups, and we help them sort of with the fulfillment of all their Kickstarter backers, where we can send them free digital codes for them to download the movie and watch the movie. And they partnered with a lot of poker organizations, and they did all this stuff on their own. They could have just as easily hired Sarah or somebody who's like a specialist in poker marketing or documentary marketing, and worked with these guys. And you know, they screened the movie at all kinds of poker events, and they really got like a lot of people in the scene involved in the movie. And so when it sort of finally opened up, it did super well, and it was kind of entirely outside what you might call like the traditional system, but.
And do you think that partly that was because there's this crazy audience for poker suddenly in the last like decade where people are like obsessed with it? And was that, do you think, the primary?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think
audience
that that's kind of like a hack that people talk about a lot, or like documentaries. People might be like, oh, well, I have like a feature film. Like we worked with Shane Carruth on Upstream Color too, right? This is the opposite of that in terms of the amount of built-in audience in a lot of ways. And he was able to still find people to help him kind of co-market the film, right? Like, and the people that he worked with was less the World Series of Poker, and it was more the Sundance Film Festival, right? Like, there are organizations that are sort of dedicated to keeping in touch with that audience of people who are interested in that kind of a thing. And it's really this process of just identifying who those partners are. Like, I think when you it's funny hearing this, like this, you know, this do it with others philosophy, and then even talking about this, you know, doing one thing very well in a way that sort of a full stack distribution house can't. If you look broadly at how the internet has changed industries, that's the effect. Is this, you can say it's disintermediation and removing middlemen or whatever, but really what happens is this balkanization of industries where each of the players gets broken down into its component parts, and it becomes a suite of tools that you need, where it's individuals doing very few things very well. And that's what we try to provide. We're just the platform to publish the site, power the transactions, serve the video, collect all of the data, present it back to you. We do none of the marketing. We're not going to help you get onto VOD or do any other part of that process. We're just going to do the one thing that is like just like a feature of iTunes. You know, it's like a feature of some of these different sites. But what the filmmakers do is they come in and they say, well, I need these 12 pieces. I'm going to pick, you know, individual partners for each of these parts of it. And what I think is really exciting is how, for us, and sort of the feedback that we've been getting from people over the last year is how well having kind of like a central piece of software, a central platform plays into all of this, because we can pay everybody involved too. Like if the filmmakers had decided to give the World Series of Poker points of the back end, we could have just paid both of them, right? And we make all this, the whole process much more frictionless. And that's kind of the name of the game, is just making it as low cost, low barriers to entry as possible.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that. I want to eventually get to the deal and how you guys, because you must have a way of making money, but I want to hold off on that. Can you guys talk about maybe a project that you worked on together as an example, and how it came to you, and if you can just cite that as an example, I think it'll be interesting.
I mean, I was thinking actually as Jamie was talking, one project that we worked on together was Downloaded, which was I think is a really good example of kind of how we at FilmBuff work. In some ways, we're probably the most traditional on the panel, which is really weird because we're only 5 years old and we're really not that traditional. But we really work, you know, our main focus is really to partner with our filmmakers. So it's not like a filmmaker goes, here's the movie, and then we go run with it. I'm on weekly calls, sometimes a couple times a week with filmmakers, and we're talking about what they've got in their arsenal that we can use to what Dylan was talking about. So for Downloaded, this was a film by Alex Winter. It's a documentary about the rise and fall of Napster. So with the participation, so it's great because it's sort of archival footage of Sean Parker and Sean Fanning when they were teenagers and started Napster, and all of the brouhaha that went with that. And then interviews with them now and the team that they worked with when they were all like 16, 17 years old at the time. And now they're in their 30s. And, Sean Parker has gone off to create Spotify. Sean Fanning sort of dips his toes into multiple things. But essentially, for us, one of the reasons that the film was attractive to us, we were a digital company. There would be no iTunes without Napster. Most of the big contention around iTunes, and especially specifically around this film and promotion of this film, is that a lot of the people who were at Napster actually went to go work at iTunes and developed that whole back end. But that's neither here nor there. Anyhow, so it was clearly a digital film, a film that clearly had an audience, a film that was important. Alex is a terrific director, and he is also Bill from Bill and Ted's. He's the Bill of Bill and Ted, which is totally cool, and looks exactly the same, which is also really weird and cool. But that said, he really wanted to be able to make the film available to as many people as possible, which is sort of in the themes of the film. So the film was financed partially, mostly by VH1. So it is a VH1 rock doc. AOL did a deal with the film, and where AOL is showing the film in it as part of their film platform.
Did you guys do the AOL deal, or did the filmmakers?
We sort of all did it together.
Okay.
So there's AOL, there's VH1. Alex also really wanted to be able to sell the film to audiences as many places as possible, so we made it available on iTunes internationally. And then he also wanted to be able to sell it to even more people and go directly to the audience, which is where VHX came in. So the film was available on all the traditional cable platforms, so in the US, Comcast, Time Warner, etc., iTunes all over the world, VHX, AOL, and eventually VH1 will finally get their window, which is they were the last ones. They put first money in, last money out. So I think it's going to be a VH1 in something like September of 2014. But to say what the point of that is that there was and we also did a theatrical on the film. So
And did the theatrical precede all the?
The theatrical was the first.
Yeah.
But we did it sort of essentially day and date. So the theatrical and the VOD went out at the same time.
See, here, what's interesting is that VH1 waited last. That would never happen in this country. That would never, ever happen. They would never allow
And
it.
to their credit, has been promoting the fact, from the very beginning, was promoting the fact that the film was in theaters and was on VOD on all their VH1 properties. So you would see ads for the theatrical and the VOD on
That's
VH1.
somewhat unique to VH1.
It's
Not every
totally
broadcaster is
unique.
going to do that
No.
in the States.
And maybe that's because of their audience, because it's a younger audience, and they understand that their audience doesn't care about windowing and doesn't want to wait.
But it also is the whole point of, as to sort of core to who we are as film buff, it's about curation.
Right.
So really knowing what that film is, knowing the film, and knowing how we can reach that audience and what that audience is, and bringing in partners to do that. So, and that I think is the key to the success of the film for us as a company, but it also is the success of the film for the filmmaker. So, I mean, I think that was one of the ways. I mean, Alex is so like, oh my God, we have to do VHX. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do it. So we just turned it on, and it's been doing really well. So I think that's an example of kind of being, but that model is not necessarily going to work for one of you. But you can learn a lot from that model in terms of being able to, I think, also what Jamie was saying, to be able to kind of be different spokes in a wheel and kind of putting together your own Magnolia or your own Weinstein or your own whatever, Joe company, because you have to really think about and be curatorial about your own film and where your film's going to have the most success and how you're going to reach that audience and who you're going to use to do that.
How about you guys? Do you guys have a project that you've worked on together that you could talk about? I think specific examples are always.
It's been a minute. The trick with Variance is that we do have an in-house marketing team, which sort of, we're not a theatrical booking service, so we've worked with film presidents who we recommend to a lot of people, but we sort of duplicate efforts if we do too many together. The last one we did, I think, was Perfect Family, because there was a...
Well, we did social media on Red Hook Summer, and we did outreach for Elevate, so it's been a little while.
Elevate was a while ago. Those are kind of outliers. I don't want to present a Spike Lee film to you guys as something you can emulate, because you guys aren't Spike Lee. And we worked with each other on Sound City, but Dave Grohl is a gigantic rock star. And you guys
History
aren't.
of Future Folk.
Well, that one didn't go so well on VOD, though, so
That's true.
I don't want to point out that
That's
one.
true, too.
Okay, why don't you choose?
Yeah, they don't always
favorite
do, like,
example.
that's the other thing. Collaborations, as great as the experience of working with Dylan on that film particularly was great. That film was one of those films that did better theatrically than it did on VOD. But it was still, we still had a great time working on it, and it's a really great film.
That's a little bit of an outlier. I think, the example that I would point out to, because we worked with similar companies, like, unfortunately, nobody here, and frankly, would have worked with VHX, is a film we did earlier this year called An Oversimplification of Her Beauty, because I think that applies very much to the kind of films that you guys are making. This is a film, its budget was $20,000. A young African-American kid in Brooklyn spent 6 years making it. It's half documentary, half animated, half love story. Just like 150% film, which is awesome. There's no stars in it. There's no cast. Some of it is shot on an iPhone. Some of it is shot on a lovely camera. It's all over the place. And a lot of distributors, pretty much, it's a Sundance film. And everyone passed on it because the general consensus actually showed me an email from someone's like, it literally says, I love your film, but I do not know what the fuck to do with it. They ended up selling all rights but theatrical to a medium-sized company in America who literally told them, we're not going to put the film out until you figure out how to put it out, because we don't know what to do with it either. But once someone figures it out, we're sure it'll go well, so we'll put it out then. So we found the film in our submission stack, basically. Like, we take submissions from filmmakers. It takes a while to watch them. We didn't know we had this, and we were actually reaching out to them, and we found it, we watched it, we loved it. So we work with them like, all right, let's figure out, do we want to go day and date VOD on this? Well, no one knows the film exists. I'm glad you brought up curation, because I feel like, and I don't know if this is happening in Canada, in all fairness. In the US, there's a glut, and there's 30 films a week that open in New York, of which 26 of them get out of New York and escape to Los Angeles, which is a terrible town for film. So then 18 of those films go on to play anywhere else, and probably of those 18, 6 are studio films that are on 2,000 screens. 4 of them are from gigantic mini majors. 3 of them are from minor companies that are just doing 15 cities to get on VOD, and then the others are sort of freestyling. It's a tough market, and there's a lot of film. A lot of it's spurred on by the fact that VOD right now is very much the center of revenue, but it's also a volume business in America. If you go in the In Theaters Now folder, and I don't think this lasts, I think there's a reckoning coming.
Oh, it's coming.
It's already here, really. I mean, you go there and you see Drinking Buddies from Magnolia, which had $1 million P&A budget, so you know that it's out there. And you see, hopefully you see one of my films that we don't have $1 million, but we've been really aggressive and loud about how awesome it is. Maybe it's a Sound City, maybe it's a Red Oak Summer, maybe it was in theaters, maybe it wasn't day and date. And then you see 20 films that seem to look like what you would find in the dollar bin, or like back when there were video stores, you would have not found the film you wanted, and you're like, well, this one's next to it. It's like a romantic comedy with like
And there's a laurel on the case.
There's always a laurel. Everyone's played a festival. It was like a 90s sitcom
But then you have to
star.
read really closely to see what the festival actually
What
is.
the fuck is the Cocoa Film Festival? And, it's got a star that you sort of recognize, and I think the general thought is, as long as we get it up there, someone will buy it. Like, I've seen the numbers on some of these, and it doesn't work so much anymore. I think audiences are wary of it. So I look at my job as, what we're good at is theatrical releasing and the parts that go into it, like the marketing of the film specifically. We are a marketing company disguised as a theatrical distributor. But going back to oversimplification, when you have a film that's kind of unmarketable, what's the best way to get people to hear of it? Well, let's get people talking about it. So, and this is, again, maybe a little bit of an outlier, Jay-Z signed on after seeing the film as executive producer, because he's like, this is great. And to us, Terrence, what do you want? Do you want money? He's like, no, I want your name. So Jay-Z, Wyatt Cenac, and Dream Hampton present an oversimplification of her beauty. That opens doors for me with movie theaters, and that opens doors with me with the press. Jay-Z's not going to do an interview about the film. Jay-Z didn't make it. I've never spoken to Jay-Z. I'm sure he's a nice guy. I cannot get tickets to the Brooklyn Nets, but I got his name on the poster, which helps me get in the door. This is something we've done before. We released a Stanley Tucci film as one of our first films, a film he directed, a little tiny film. We had another black and white musical. We took it to him. It's like, can we put your name on it? Stanley Tucci presents. Sometimes that's enough to open a door. Now your unrecognizable film has something recognizable to it. Now we cut a fantastic trailer. Flying Lotus does some music for it. Now it's on all the music blogs. Now we've got an entry into the film world. We've got real good entry into the music world. Now we can start to generate some revenue. We spent a total of $6,500 releasing the film, which is not a lot of money. I mean, a lot of that went to FedEx, frankly, shipping Blu-rays across the country. The film has made $75,000 and counting in theaters, and the company that did the DVD and VOD is like, okay, now we'll do it. And I believe as of yesterday, it's available for anyone who wants to buy it. I don't think it's available in anywhere on except iTunes on Canada, but it is good. Our job is to basically take a film from a $20,000 film on someone in Brooklyn's hard drive to something that's on all the stores that you've heard of, you've read a review, you've seen the poster, you might have seen a clip, hitting you from all these different angles. So even if you don't go to one of the 60 theaters we're booking with the film, it's something that when you see it on that long list on VOD, whether it be iTunes or cable, you're like, yeah, I've heard of that. Because at this point with the glut, I don't think anyone's shopping for films anymore. I think the Netflix model has killed that.
Yeah.
Let's talk specifically, because there's a lot of, obviously this room is full of Canadian filmmakers, some very senior who've been doing it a long time. How could they specifically work with you? And we talked a little bit about this before we started. So generally in Canada, people are going to have raised the money or some of it and paid for some of it themselves with money that we can leverage here in Canada. And it often means pre-selling Canada, either for television or they may have a Canadian theatrical distributor on board. And one of the challenges for Canadians is always to get their films out in the United States. We want to reach American audiences. Often American audiences actually want to see our films, but it's hard to make those two meet. So if say they were people in the audience were interested in getting you a film or working with you, how would they do that? And do any of you have examples of Canadian films that you could talk about that you've done, or does anyone want to jump in on that? How would you start?
I mean, we have the Canadian film. We have worked on Canadian films. We are going to be releasing Bert's Buzz, which was at TIFF this year, and had signed on with the film before it got into TIFF, and then it did, which was great, and it was really well received. And we're super, super excited about working with Jody because he's awesome and Canadian, and I love Canadians.
And is that specifically for the U.S.? Because you've
Specifically for the U.S. because
Okay.
he's already done Canada.
Yeah.
So it's for the U.S. only. So we'll be doing that. And we work, it's for us, it's really not about whether or not someone's Canadian or French or Mexican or Spanish or whatever it is. It really is about the film. And I know that sounds really cliche, but it is about the film and frankly, the filmmaker. So we have absolutely turned down really good films where the filmmakers are nightmares. Because I'll say straight up, because especially for myself and the content team, and we recently kind of made a change in the way that we look at how people perceive us, in that we used to have a head of acquisitions, and now that person is, his title, he still does the same job, but his title is the head of content partnerships. Because we say all the time how we are partners with the filmmakers, but when the word acquisitions, especially for those of us who've been around for a while, it just kind of has a different kind of connotation. So we have a content partnership team. So his job and his team's job is to go out and find really great content for us to partner on and get out there. So it really isn't about whether or not you're Canadian or not. It's like, do you have a film that we feel that we're going to do a really good job on, and do we want to work with you? And vice versa. You might not want to work with us. It's entirely possible.
So talking about that specific film, what are your plans for that film?
For Bert's? Well, the great thing, which makes my job so much easier, is that it got such a great reception. So it's not going to be necessarily, and it played a major festival, which is great. So we got a ton of great press out of it. We'll be doing a theatrical release in the U.S. because I think it really does merit that.
And what size of theatrical? Because that's unusual. I mean, there's literally a handful of Canadian films a year that'll get a U.S. theatrical. So love to know how big, or do you know yet?
We don't really know, but I think we're going to do for VOD in the U.S., which I think Dylan was alluding to a little bit earlier. In order to get sort of day and date mapping on cable specifically, because there is a glut of content out there, and the way that content is divided is by what their status is in terms of pricing and foldering and mapping, and it is a completely antiquated, ridiculously stupid system, but it is the system that we have to deal with. So in order for a film to go into that sort of day and date category, which is a premium, what they would call a premium category, you have to play the film in at least 15 theatrical markets. The great thing about Bert's Buzz is that I think it's a film that actually merits that. Some films, as I'm sure all of us know, do not. And those 15 markets by some of our friends at other companies are like one night here, one night here, one night here, and that's a 15 market release.
Well, that shit don't work no more, though.
It doesn't work anymore.
The jig is up.
The jig is definitely up,
Shenanigans.
because I, as recently as 2 weeks ago, had a meeting with Comcast, which is the biggest sort of market cable share, and I was saying, because I look at our competitors. It's not like I'm not looking at what everybody else is doing. And they in certain terms were like, no, we're stopping that. We are like, they're actually going to start giving a list of the 15 markets that you have to play in and the week run, which is going to not be a good thing for lots of people.
But I'm okay with it.
But it weeds out. So you are actually, when they say it's in theaters now or it's day and date, it actually is in theaters for more than one night.
But a lot of people just perceive the theatrical release really as sort of a promo for everything else, for TV and all the other platforms. That with so many indies, people aren't actually looking at theatrical for revenue. They're just using it to get the critical reviews and sort of lay the groundwork for this promotional strategies.
It's great. For indies, it is great marketing. I mean, and when I say indies, I mean sort of our level of indies, because even saying indies is kind of a misnomer, because Weinstein Company, of course they want to make money on their theatrical, and they're an indie. Same with Fox Searchlight, same with Magnolia. Everybody else wants to make money on their theatrical. The Magnolia is a little bit weird because they actually own theaters, but that's a whole other story. But
Shenanigans.
we are, for us, I think it's really, it's about getting awareness out there as much as we possibly can, because we're working on really, really small budgets. Like $6,500 to release a movie is like, if someone from Fox Searchlight was in
I'm
this
not gonna
room,
do
they
that
would
again.
have died on the spot. Like, no way.
They would have been like, you can't even
can't
do
even-
one
that's-
billboard for
That's
65.
that's not even hair and makeup for talent.
No.
Can
Well,
we
I'm-
rewind a second too? And I'd like to know how many documentary filmmakers are in the room, if
Good
any.
question.
Okay, good. Because a key function of theatrical in the States and doing it yourself is qualifying for an Academy, for an
Yeah.
Oscar.
And you're specifically mean for documentaries.
Yeah.
That's why
Yes.
a lot of documentaries
That's
will get.
why
Yeah.
so many documentaries open.
So
Well,
you
and
do
now
your
you have
week
to
in
have
New York
the
and your week
LA
in LA.
or New York Times
Yeah.
review
Yeah.
on top of that, right?
Yeah.
Although the Academy has been a little nicer, where they can now, I think it's New York Times, LA Times, Tony, and Time Out New York,
Village
and
Voice?
then Village Voice. So you used to be it had to be the New York Times and it had to be the LA Times, and they've gotten less strict.
You still have to get the review from there, but you can place the ad
Yeah.
in a cheaper place.
Can I ask a question? So,
Of us or of
yeah,
them?
no, you guys. I'm learning a lot right here. I'm a computer programmer.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like everybody who controls the reins on the audience is raising the bar for making you work with them. And how do you feel about that? And why is that okay?
It's the best thing in the world because and look, I tell you flat out, I used to have a sort of arrangement with one of Film Buff's competitors where we were going to do a couple films together. And you have to do a thing where you do the 15 cities at the same time. And we don't do fake releases, so we're not going to play it at 6 o'clock in Detroit. I can think of 50 of my films. I can think maybe 3 or 4 the right way to release that film. Just put it on 15 screens at the same time. So I have to ask myself, what's more important to me? Is it more important for me to be in a folder on iTunes, which is a good thing to be. It's more visibility, charge $3 more for the film, or is it better for me to do what I want to do with the film, take $3 less for the VOD, and hopefully maybe more people will take a chance on it, and then release the film the way it's proper. To me, I think if the shitty romantic comedies want to follow the 15-city rule, and they say, oh, you have to play in these 15 cities, and one of them is Grand Rapids, enjoy yourself. The Grand Rapids guy who lets you rent his theater for $6,000 for a week is going to be overjoyed. It's going to be fantastic for him. My job is to work away from sort of all these companies. Look, the overarching answer to your question, which is a terrible answer, is the entertainment industry is full of people who try to rearrange things as best as possible to keep their jobs, and to keep their company on top of the list. If you have a model that you're set on and you can't be flexible with it, you're eventually going to wind up functioning as a pipe. Your job is to take the film from point A to point B, and you're going to find yourself in the realm of travel agents. You don't need the travel agent. Book your own ticket. The way it separates out is marketing. If you are able to make a film real for people, you've got a place, you're going to be good to go. If your job is to make the film available to people, technology will make that obsolete. So therefore, we have a situation where do we follow these rules that are set by the dude that runs Comcast, or do we say, you know what's better for this film? Just maybe steer around that and just say, you know what, put it in the other folder. We'll do such a good job marketing the film in the correct way that people will find it when we're done with it.
Yeah.
I like the latter.
I mean, that's the conversation I have with filmmakers all the time. It's like, we can do the 15 market release, but we feel like your film deserves better than and we don't think we're going to be able to book it for a week in every market. So there's scenario one where you go $6.99 and you could be doing one night events or whatever it might be. And here's scenario two where you're going $4.99, which is the regular price, but we're actually going to be spending that money that we would be spending doing your theatrical on marketing. So the awareness for your film is going to, so you might have a lower price point, but you're actually going to have more people seeing your film.
And credit to FilmBuff for being like, not all the VOD companies want that. Because a lot of VOD companies that only do VOD, they only care what you make from VOD. They don't give a shit what you spend on the theatrical, and they don't give a shit what you get from direct to fan. My job is to give a shit about all of it for you, so I have to say, well, these guys want this, and these guys are willing to do that. This makes them more, but this doesn't make you more. It's hard to sort of process all that. But you bring up theatrical as a loss leader. I disagree with that as much as possible. I would say half of our films either break even on the theatrical or get close, which is the definition of a loss leader. Oversimplification, they gave me $7,500 to release the film. I gave them back 30 grand. That's an outlier at some point, but if you can figure out a way to not spend money on stuff that doesn't work, that $250,000 theatrical all of a sudden becomes $30,000. Print ads are a great example. I always have, the old school way is a chunk of your budget for a theatrical release is spent on advertising in the newspaper. How many of you guys got the newspaper 10 years ago? Raise your hand. How many of you guys get it now? All right, so I got the New York Times saying $5,000 for an ad about this big, which you're probably going to skip over anyway in the paper. I read the New York Times on my iPad, so I said, New York Times, well, does this ad appear on the iPad? And they're like, no. So why the fuck would anyone do that? And you open the New York Times, inevitably, I know how much it costs, so I count up the money they're spending on this shit. And these are films opening in one theater in New York, and they're small films, and they just spent $12,000 on that little shitty ad that I'm only getting because they give me the paper for free because I placed an ad with them once.
Yeah, it's crazy. It actually is, but I also think that that's a filmmaker expectation thing, because people want to, and this is becoming more of an issue, and I know you know about this, is that, and specifically in New York, it is so hard to, there are I think 6 or 7 theaters that will actually even play a VOD movie.
And you
So
pay
if you're in
for
VOD, and now you used to be able to slip in there. Now it's $9 grand, right off the bat.
To play the film.
To play the film.
So that means why should I like day and date model. I like availability for the masses. When I do a national campaign on my film, the most I'm going to play, even if things go right, Dave Grohl's Sound City, a perfect example. Played 180 cities. They didn't expect to make a dime off the theatrical. We made $500,000. It was available the same day we opened in theaters, available to buy directly from VHX, and it was available on all the cable platforms. And Dave Grohl's a big rock star, and this film made a couple $1 million on VOD while it was in theaters. We're still in theaters. It came out in January. But does that scale down? Like, I'm able to cheat Landmark a little bit and say, like, look, if we play it the day before, it's not really day and date, so what if we did that? And they're like, oh, it's Dave Grohl, it's going to sell out, let's do it. You got to be able to weasel your way in, and everybody changes the rules on you so much that it's sort of your job is to say, okay, well, these rules are stupid, so we're just not going to do it. I can take that VOD price point away from the in-theater snaffle, they're wait a week and save $9,000 on my New York City run. Will I make $9,000 from this film on VOD if I charge $3 more for 6 weeks? That's the question I have to answer, and can't really answer it, but you can do the math. This will change. Eventually it will be curated and it will be quality, and people won't be doing 40 films a month at some of your competitors' companies, which we're not going to diss the competitors. But
they really do 40 films a month.
And it's
I don't
bullshit.
even know how they do it.
Because if you got, let's say you got 40
do they
people.
sleep? I don't know how they do it.
They don't sleep because they don't do anything. There's no marketing. The film is available, but just because it's available, it doesn't mean you have to care. There are a legion of films that nobody gives a shit about. And it's the most horrible thing in the world because you're filming, you spent so much time on it. Charged your credit card, you got mortgages, and then someone just farts it out. It's awful.
Hold on,
I think Canadians would be honored if someone farted out there.
No, you should be like, no farting.
They shouldn't,
What you
though.
guys
You
would
deserve
know, but
better.
what you guys will
Shouldn't be
find is
honored.
most Canadians actually they just want to get their film out into that marketplace. They want to get eyeballs seeing.
But
their
getting
film.
it out into the marketplace and having people see it are two very separate things.
Totally.
Absolutely.
So I want to come back to that question. How can Canadian filmmakers work with you? And what kind of deals do you structure? So how if we're going to work with a number of filmmakers tomorrow on their specific projects, but if anyone in the audience has a completed film or a film that they're making and they like what you guys have to say, how do they get it to you? How do you work with them? How do you structure the deal? Do you take a commission? Tell us about that.
Yeah, we like a Vimeo link. That's the way to get a film to me, because you can just email it. The postage gets high between the US and Canada. DVDs, you got to carry them around. You got to make a good film. If you make a good film, and frankly, we haven't done a Canadian film since I think we did a Bruce McDonald film when I was at Think Film that I loved, and the company went bankrupt, and I had to actually lie to Technicolor to get them their prints back, and that's why I don't work at Think Film
Awesome.
anymore.
You lied to Technicolor to get a filmmaker's prints back. I love that.
Yeah, but now it's digital. We don't need it no more. So I want to see a good film. If a Canadian, American, we've done, I think a quarter of our films are actually from China at this point. If you make a good film, we're going to tell you, all right, here's the deal with variants. We don't have any money. We don't take investors. We don't have anyone telling us what to do. Therefore, we don't have any money. So we got to figure out where the P&A is going to come from. It can be a Kickstarter situation. It could be a grant situation. It can be a very small amount of money. You're going to bring that and your film to the table. Our deal is basically going to be a flat fee versus a percentage of the gross to make sure that we're not taking your entire P&A and putting it in our pocket. We were under the impression that we're not going to get rich in indie film, and once you do that, it's so much better. In turn, you own the rights to your film. We partner up with you. As long as the film is good, and if we can figure out a way to affordably put it out, we can work together. No question about it.
So, okay, so say if I had made like $1 million film,
Maybe
first
with
time
Simon Pegg in
director.
it and-
Yeah, that one's taken.
Yeah, I figured it.
Sorry.
A little big.
So, but I produced 5 first-time directors. So, say that just pulling out a thing. Say it was $1 million film. It premiered at TIFF. But if we came to you, you would want, say, we came and said, like, I'm wondering, what if we can go to Telefilm Canada and go, okay, we want to get our films out in the States. Even if we got $5,000, we could come to a company like Variants. No?
It's
How
a little
much?
more than that. I
How
mean,
much?
Generally,
Give me
the low
The
end.
leads. I need the good leads.
We do 1 or 2 a year for like $7,500. We're not going to do it whenever possible because we don't get any money, and it's sort of our pro bono work. Like generally, the low end tends to be in the $30,000 range, ranging up to no more than $80,000, $90,000, except for a film like A Red Hook Summer, or occasionally we have a filmmaker with more money than sense and wants to put 250 grand into it, and we usually give them a check back for 150 grand at the end of it because that's way too much.
Okay, so Dylan wants at least 30 grand. Okay, moving on. I'm just gonna keep going. I just want to lay it out. I mean, I just want people to really know, like, what. You need a Vimeo link and 30 grand. Okay.
I need a DCP and I need a film with some marketing hooks that don't cost money.
Yeah.
Like that's the
Okay.
other thing.
I
Well,
think
they
that's
hire money because then you need to hire me
Yeah.
to work the marketing.
Fair enough. Touche.
So I haven't mentioned it yet, but we do outreach and marketing for Kickstarter campaigns, but we take a percentage, we take 10%, and it has to be a film that's shooting for $100,000 or more, because otherwise it's not worth your time or our time to pay us a percentage. So that's one structure. And then for theatrical grassroots and outreach, it ranges from $5,000 to $35,000 depending on the scope, how many markets, how long the rollout is. So there's quite a range. And that's usually coming out of a P&A budget from Magnolia or somewhere, or Dylan's written it into the budget based on the money that you've, come forth to him with. And then he allots. There's a line for marketing and outreach. Yeah.
okay.
Oh, VHX is free to use. You can publish a website with it. If you're selling content, we just take a cut of the gross. We take 15% and 50 cents per transaction. But otherwise you can use the rest of the platform. It's totally non-exclusive. We actually sometimes joke about being reverse exclusive because your sales tend to, always are better the more widely available it is. So like when people are like, oh, do I have to be in iTunes? I was like, well, it's kind of a pain in the butt, but yes, your sales will go up because people will see it there, tweet about it, then people will Google it, land on your webpage, and you can buy it right there.
Okay.
Like Dylan, I like a Vimeo link. So we need to see the film first. Crazy as that is. We're a little bit unique in that we kind of do combo deals. So some films come to us with no P&A, which means that we don't do a theatrical in it, or we work with them to try and help them raise the P&A if it is a film that we decide that we want to partner with someone like Dylan or another theatrical. We work with Abramarama a lot in the U.S., and he's done a lot of our films. So it really kind of varies. Some come with 0, some come with 150,000. That's rare. We don't usually do films that big. We have a kind of sister company called PDA, which we have worked on 4 films together, and those tend to be the bigger films like Senna, Exit at the Gift Shop. We're about to do Escape from Tomorrow. So those have much bigger P&A budgets. But really, it's about, again, what Dylan said, it's really about having a marketing hook and having something, there's got to be some meat on the bone, especially if you're coming with $0 to support it, to actually get it out. We have expenses, so it's not free to get your film onto VOD. There are actually hard costs, so we have expense caps. We try and keep everything as low as possible. We do a lot of the stuff in-house, and we don't farm it out to keep those expenses low. But your film has to be in a particular format to get to iTunes. There's nothing we can do about it. That's what it is. So there are expenses, but they're usually, with borrowing anything under like $3,500. So
That's crazy to me, by the way.
that there's $7,500,
It's
or
just-
that
it's-
we have to pay to get it to iTunes.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
it's a digital. It's an MP4.
Yeah,
It's like
one would think, but you can only with iTunes in particular. There's a list of approved vendors.
Yep.
And you have to, in order for you to deliver a film to iTunes, you have to use those approved vendors, and there are costs. That is it. You can't use somebody else who is not approved by iTunes to deliver your film to iTunes.
Right. Okay, so let's say a filmmaker comes to you guys and they haven't had anyone pick them up for theatrical in the U.S., but they want to get it out there, and so they want to go for the VOD market. Mm-hmm. Do you see sort of, because the United States, the population is so much bigger than Canada, do you see sort of if it's a lower budget indie film, sort of an average that people could expect to reach from VOD, or a minimum, or is it just too all over the map?
It's too
crazy?
all over the place. Okay. I mean, obviously, our job is to maximize the revenue for the filmmaker. So because that maximizes the revenue for us. So we really are partners. If the filmmaker doesn't make any money, we don't make any money. We actually lose money because we're fronting the expenses. So certain films do well on certain platforms, which is goes back to my original point, do your research. So there are films that are going to do well transactionally. There are films that tank transactionally, but do really well on Hulu. And actually make more money on Hulu than they ever would have made on a pay-per-view kind of system. So it really is kind of figuring out, knowing your film, and us being able to know the platform. So the other half of my job within working with filmmakers is working with actually the platforms and talking to iTunes and talking to Hulu and talking to all of the MSOs and knowing what's working, what's not working, because we can see our numbers, we can't see everybody else's numbers. It's not like Box Office Mojo, where I can type in Box Office Mojo and look at a Variance film or a Weinstein Company film and know how much money that film made theatrically. You can't do that with VOD.
Yeah.
So I have to spend my time sort of trying to figure out, looking at all of the different platforms and what they're promoting, what they're not promoting, and then talking to them about what's working and what's not working, so that when the filmmaker comes to me, I can say, you know what, this particular platform, they really are not into docs right now. Mm-hmm. So we probably shouldn't push that platform. And maybe, Netflix is, who does subscription, they pay license fees. So maybe Netflix is not, at one point, Netflix was spending a lot of money on films. I mean, upwards of $100,000 license fees. That world has gone because they are clearly spending all of their money on becoming a network. So all of that money that they were paying the filmmakers for license fees is now going into all of their series. So that world has changed, and that's happened in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. So it really is about, our job, at least I feel my job is to make sure that I know what the landscape is, so that when you come to me, I can say, you know what, here's what I think that what your estimates are gonna be based on what the VOD world looks like now.
And what is do you take a commission off that, I would assume? No?
But we take a commission on getting the film or spend it?
Yeah, what's your deal?
It's usually around 15%.
15%, okay. I mean, it's interesting. I want to start opening it up too. If people have questions, feel free to raise your hand. But I think, in Canada, we're very unused to this sort of American model where people pay people for it. Like, we're used to having historically theatrical distributors who will put up an advance or broadcasters who will pre-buy. But I don't know. It's interesting. I'm starting to, personally as a producer, thinking about it more because a couple of our titles we've sold into the U.S. One of them was picked up by a company, and they didn't pay an MG, but we didn't have to pay them either. But because they didn't put up an MG, we got a lower commission, and they sold it to Showtime, but then they went bankrupt. So we never got anything back from that Showtime deal, and a lot of the films I've produced have been picked up by Showtime, and then we've never seen anything for that. And so now I'm like, well, is that actually a better deal? Here in Canada, we tend to think, well, that's really weird. Do you want me to pay you to put out the film? And I think we all sort of have a knee-jerk reaction against it because it's just not a model we're used to. But in a way, I'm starting to wonder about that, right? If it was $5,000 or $30,000, is that better if we could sit down and know that there was going to be revenue behind that and an audience?
You guys are almost in the exact same boat as 95% of American independent filmmakers whose films aren't acquired at festivals. So you have to ask yourselves the same questions that they are asking themselves, which is, I've spent 3 years making this movie, I premiered at such and such a festival, nobody acquired it, now what do I do? So this isn't, that's why we exist. The now what do we do? Because you don't want, you can't distribute the film yourself, and you need help to do it. So if you want it to be seen, you're going to need help, and there's all these different platforms. And if you're going to cough up the money, and this is something I want to talk to you about before, if you're going to be spending the money to distribute the film yourself, and you've mapped out your roadmap, and you're going to open in New York and LA or 5 other markets or 15 markets so that you qualify, whatever else, you have to think about the marketing, because it needs to stand out among the 100 other films that are doing the exact same thing that year. Also, just do yourself a service. So let's say you're making a social issue documentary, and you actually do want to have an impact with your film, and you actually do want to have a robust educational and community screening tour with your film. If you're going to be coughing up $50,000 anyway to open it in New York and LA and qualify it, you might as well create incredible partnerships, as many as you can at that moment, because that is the sexiest moment that your film will ever have in its entire life. The end. When you open your film in New York and LA and you're in the New York Times, you can get the biggest partner, that's the moment to get them on board, and then they're on. And then you can use them when you're on VOD or when you're starting your educational campaign or this or that. So don't just cough up the money to put it out. Don't fart it out.
I'm gonna stop using that analogy.
Don't just do that. Think about what your long-term goal is and why you are spending $50,000 to do this. And it should not just be a vanity project. There should be a goal to it at the end of the day. And if you want it to be a calling card, or if you want it to qualify, or if you want it to have a robust educational, so you need those reviews. Think about what it is, and then create the rest of your team around that.
And it really is not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
And you really have to, I know it's really, really hard to make a film, but getting a film out there is even harder.
I gotta say, I make, we've been around for a while, so I make this weird pitch to people, and I've made it from everyone from first-time filmmakers to sitting across from Spike Lee and look at me like this. I'm like, look, I want you to give me your film, I want you to give me the money to release, and I want you to give me a fee to do it. That's a shitty pitch. So I have to say, why would you do that? Well, here's the deal. My job is to take, not only your film and get out there, my job is, let's go back to your film that sold to Showtime. You had a distributor buy all rights, I'm guessing? I took everything. I refuse to believe, most likely, there's distributor X out there who is the best at theatrical, the best at outreach, and the best at DVD, and the best at VOD.
We knew they weren't going to do theatrical. We were being on. Even though the film was at TIFF, it didn't really have that particular film didn't have stars in it, and it was a very upfront discussion that they weren't going to pursue theatrical, and that particular company only did in very specialized circumstances.
Okay, so let's take it hypothetical though. Let's say your film's got a little something to it, and frankly, even with that pitch, we get, I would say, probably somewhere along the lines of 130 films that come to us each year. We did the math at one point. We turned down 95% of the films were sent. And these are films where they're coming to us with the film and money. And why would you turn that down? Why would you just hire more people and put 95 films a year out? Because if we, with that pitch, take on films that we know aren't going to work, we're going to be out of business. So this is a model that, it involves a little bit of upfront money. Well, when's a good time to find $50,000? Well, if you're making a $300,000 film, Maybe you make a $350,000 film and don't spend $50,000 of it, so you have a backup plan. If giant distributor X comes in and offers you a metric shit ton of money, you're probably going to take it. That happens in America too. Now, we're not counting the films at TIFF that, you know, are $15 million films that someone's going to buy, the one with Naomi Watts or whatever. We're counting, you know, films like you guys are making. That happens to probably 5 or 6 films a year. Harvey takes a liking to it, or, you know, Magnolia's like, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and buy it, even though it doesn't have stars. What if you're one of the other 99%? Like, should you maybe have a backup plan? And if you have a backup plan, what can we bring to that? We can bring the ability to get people who are good at what they're doing separate things, and all of them writing you a check. If Variance goes bankrupt, no one gets hurt because we don't take any rights. We work as your agent. If we go bankrupt, you get your film back. Like, we didn't take it in the first place. We've helped you sign a deal with someone who just does VOD. Like you said, Netflix isn't really looking for films anymore, so when we do that with VOD, we carve Netflix out of that and take it to this DVD guy. The DVD guys all really want VOD because DVD's going away, but they're not the best at it. But they have this old Netflix deal that pays 5 or 6 figures. So if we give them DVD and Netflix on your film, they can make you that $50,000 to $100,000 from Netflix that you can't get anymore because Netflix doesn't really want movies, they want TV shows. Then we can say, well, but no one gets a percentage of direct-to-fan, so I can bring a film to VHX and say, don't write checks to me to take a 25% fee out of it, write a check to the filmmaker. Like, it's direct-to-fan, I'm not doing anything. I'm doing the marketing, but they put up the money, so it's their money. Write them a check themselves. The goal of Variance is to make sure instead of getting 1 check that you depend on, you're getting 4. You're getting whatever comes back from the theatrical, you're getting something from the DVD guys, you're getting something from the VOD guys, and you're getting something from direct-to-fan. And they're all writing checks to you, not to me. Like, when you do that pitch, then Spike Lee's like, I get it. I've worked at every studio in town. This makes sense. John Sayles, we're doing the second John Sayles film. He's been self-financing his film since 1980. You want to talk about the grandfather of indie film. This guy's been at every studio. He's taken studio money to make a film once, and he won't do it again. It works the same way scaled down with someone like Terrence on Oversimplification, and it works for someone like Dave Grohl, who's like, I don't need someone to write a check for me. Like, but it also works for someone who's like, you know, I did a Kickstarter to raise $25,000 for distribution, which isn't that, it's hard, but if you got some backup, that's not an incredibly impossible amount of money to raise. You raised 25 grand, now you've got 1,000 backers who all have a stake in your film. We can get those 1,000 people to tell 10 people, now you got 10,000. And it comes together pretty quickly, but on 95% of the films, we have to look and say, if it works perfectly, it comes together like that, but we don't see the path, so we have to pass.
Yeah.
I think the other challenge maybe for Canadians too is that we often have a sales agent. And we tend to always try and keep the US rights, but you know, increasingly in this country, we basically have one distributor, and that's Entertainment One. Mongrel is then the other next player, and they do very specialized product, and they turn down a lot of stuff, and they, you know, they have the Sony output deal. They do a lot of foreign films, Cannes award winners, et cetera. So not every film is going to get picked up by Mongrel in this country, but if you get E1 on board, then they also want foreign. And I used to be able to negotiate for them not to have US, and increasingly they won't. So other filmmakers too will have a sales agent attached who may have the US, so they don't even necessarily have a say in the US. Or, you know, we did a film, for example, called Daydream Nation, and we had a private investor in that film, and we wanted to get them paid out. We also had an investment from Telefilm Canada, so our sales agent negotiated a deal for the US and a couple other English-speaking territories that basically almost completely paid out the private investor who was backing the MG. And we were able to pay some money back for Canada. Well, the company that picked up the US four-walled it in LA and then just, you know, collected the other revenue, which we will never see any reports on that because it was that the deal was done. But the priority for us was to get that investor mostly, if not entirely, paid out. And, you know, the problem with that was that it was really disappointing, especially for the cast, who increasingly, it's bad for cast. If you get stars, that film had Kat Dennings, it had Josh Lucas, it had Andy McDowell. They don't want to have their names in a film that's then not going to be released. It's bad for their careers. So that's always a challenge. You need the cast to get the financing, to get the sales agent, to get the distribution, and then it doesn't come out and get distributed properly, and then the cast is pissed off. I don't know.
But that's why it's even more important to go back to Dylan's model, and why we do the same thing, is that you have to you can't put all of your eggs in one basket anymore. That is the studio way. The studio owns everything. They used to own the talent, they own the distribution, they own the product, they owned everything. Now it's about kind of creating your own distributor. And that circle, and marketing is part of that, PR is part of that, talent is part of that, theatrical is part of that, VOD is part of that, TV, foreign, all of that is part of that. You can actually do it where you can cobble together and put it all together so you are getting multiple checks and you're not just solely dependent on one company and one entity. I think that model is just, it's not, the old model isn't sustainable. This model of having all these different factors involved is the only way that these films, that are the thousands of films that are being made every year, are actually going to reach an audience. And you actually see revenue from that.
That sounds really daunting, to assemble a team of 18 people to distribute your film, and it's over the course of a year and a half, right? Like, what? How are you going to do that? But if you find one person in that system, in that chain, that you really like, let's say it's Dylan, or let's say it's you, or let's say it's you, you're going to say, okay, I know a really good theatrical booker you should work with on this one. And through the constellation, you will assemble that team, and it won't be so...
Right, that's why we work together, because
Right.
that exact thing has happened.
And you talked
Well,
about sales
also
agents.
every film needs a champion. I mean, that's what I find. I can tell right away when I'm pitching a project or a script. If I don't have a champion of that project in the company, the film, it's dead. It's over. It's over before you even start it. Because if you have one person that believes in it, who's going to be like, no, we should do this, and is excited, then that starts that chain and all those other relationships.
And you mentioned sales agents. I mean, look, with me and sales agents for 5 years, I can put them in buckets. Like the ones that work on commission, there are films where you get your film into Sundance or TIFF, the sales agents start calling. They don't know what your film is, they don't know you're from Adam, but your film's in Sundance, take a sales agent. You probably should. Like, there's sales to be made. I have a litany of films I've worked on where I could not start until exactly one day after the film premiered at Sundance because they signed a one-year contract with a sales agent who couldn't sell the film. The sales agent gets a commission. I'm not paying any money. So the sales agent could give a shit about variance. Like, I'm not going to sell it, but I'm going to wait out the clock. There are other sales agents who get it. And they're like, look, if you do this, I'm able to sell this VOD. I'm able to sell international. This is a good idea. Now, with a lot of agencies taking on sales agents, there's something called packaging, where someone like CAA basically, they're helping get a film made. They're not just selling it. Instead of just selling it, they're also using the agents who represent talent to connect them with agents who represent directors and writers, who connect them with the financing people. And so they're not just after a commission. They're after making their clients happy, and all of their clients are in this film. So I'm getting a lot of calls from them because it's in their interest not to let a film die on the shelf.
But
And
that
films
wouldn't
do
have
a shelf
happened
life.
like 3 years ago. That's been
Didn't.
a
Brand new.
definite shift in the fact that we've gotten 3 films from CAA over the last year, because the tide has turned. Whereas I don't think 3 years ago, 2 years ago, CAA had been like, no, sorry,
No,
we need
no
an
way.
MG, we need this, we need that. And because I think that the tide is certainly turning, and people are starting to really figure out, oh, this VOD thing, it's actually going to mean something. It's actually here to stay. And it's not just kind of us being like, come on, you guys. Now I do sense that there's a tide turning.
And it's smart because, there's a focus of getting away from what's best for me. If you have a sales agent, that sales agent is going to make a commission off the sale of your film. So it's in his interest to sell the film. But you have to make sure you structure these deals, and maybe it's a lesser time period, maybe it's out clauses, where it doesn't transition from doing what's best for the film to doing what's best for the sales agent. Like, if you've got someone who's like, it's been 7 months since the festival, chances are that film's not selling to anybody. Like, if you generally know what's going to happen to a film 3 weeks after Sundance. No one's, putting that offer that's magic. No one's going to come back 6 months later and be like, hey, I forgot to buy this movie. Like, so why I have to wait a year to work on, I can't say the title of the film, I haven't announced it yet, but like, I got one right now. Like, I can't announce it to the public until January 22nd. Like, it's bananas. Like, you gotta, before you sign that deal, you have the power. So that's the time to talk to the sales agent and say, look, this is a backup plan. And, it's smart to have a backup plan. It makes me happy with you if you let me do the backup plan. And it makes me not go to these panels where we're all going to go out and have drinks in a minute. Some of you guys have done this before, and I want everyone to tell everybody their experience with everyone they've worked with, because the independent film community, at least in America, and I think Canada too, is so connected and so willing to share information. All you have to do is ask. If you want to know something from a director, you can tweet at the guy that directed Putty Hill, and he will answer your question about a sales agent on Twitter. Like, that's awesome, and it's such a wealth of data. You just have to ask. That gives you power, though, because now you've got a sales agent who's not doing what you want, or you've got distributors not doing what you want. You can say, look, people are going to ask me what I thought of you, and I'm going to tell them the truth. But you don't have that power once you sign the contract that says, this is what we're going to let you do.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point. And now, basically, you have to have an out clause or a time frame where there's performance measures, et cetera. And that's only entered into it for me in the last 5 years, because formerly you would just have to give all rights for like 20, 25 years, right? So now, I mean, I'm going through this process now where we terminated a sales agent, and that just turned into this horrible, painful process where then suddenly nobody was doing anything with the film for a year, and it's basically killed the film.
It gets worse, though. Like,
Oh,
we're working with John Sayles now, so as you know, he's an indie godfather. We're trying to put together a situation where, with a certain company that might be up here, it might not, where you're going to be able to go to a website and get some of his old films. We don't have the rights to this. We got to go find them. There are 4 films out of his 18 that nobody will admit to owning. And we can trace the papers, and we can say, like, you know you have the rights to this. And they're like, oh, we're not sure. We have to check. Yeah. Think about a 20-year deal. Now, think back 20 years ago. Go get a newspaper from the library. How many distributors with their logos 20 years ago, aside from the top 4 or 5, are still in business? You're basically being asked to commit the future of your film to a company that is almost guaranteed to go away by the time the deal is done. That is, what if there's one thing this model can accomplish, it's getting rid of that ridiculous notion of ownership for 20 years of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, things have a lot of life beyond just that first year too, and that's kind of like something that we're running into a lot. Yeah. Is I love buying like a collection of all the films you've ever made for $50. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just was thinking when you guys were talking about this 15-city release and how, what it seems to me is that the people who are still trying to perpetrate the old model are just putting the screws to it, right? And trying to tighten it down and stick to it. I see this internationally with different territories and trying to keep all these territories separate. But to me, that just tells me that it's getting closer and closer, just totally blowing up.
It's not malicious.
It's not malicious. Everybody has shareholders.
They're doing it for an idea.
No, I agree it's not malicious, but the
But
more
it's
they
wrong.
try to control it, the more it's just not going to be able to be controlled.
We got the internet,
Yeah.
baby. The wheels are off the motherfucker. It's over.
Yes.
Like, it's done. Like, the shit don't work.
Did someone tweet that?
The shit has not worked. Don't put dashes in. I want my mom knowing I curse. Like, we are 5 years behind the music industry, and what happened with music, if we're smart about it, doesn't happen with film, where your best bet is on Spotify, where you're going to make 0.00005 cents for a month of someone playing your song indefinitely. Like, if we can take the record companies out of the equation, if you can self-release your model, if you can self-release your film, you can work with people who are good at it to do what they're good at, but not give them what they're not good at, you can actually make some money off your film, you can retain your ownership, you can get it out there in the way that it was originally intended. You don't need 35mm prints anymore. You don't need $20,000 for that. You don't need print ads anymore. You don't need $50,000 for that. We got hard drives. We got high-speed internet. We got files we can send. This makes it democratic for the first time ever. It's going to be fantastic once we work out the kinks. It's just like the healthcare in America. We're all getting there. We're trying to catch up.
Let's not compare it to that.
No. It is very much the same, though. We opened the websites yesterday, and people are like, well, I can't get on the website because, yeah, it's so popular you can't get on the website. Okay, well, right now, this model is so popular that you can't find a film on iTunes because there's 50 other films coming out every Tuesday. It's easier to make a film now than it ever has been before. You do not need $1 million to make a film. Like, I'm seeing quality films that look great that are made for 50, 60, 75 grand. Has this resulted in a plethora of better films? Hell to the no. Like, but as long as there's some sort of model that involves curation where someone is like, the cream does rise to the top. If you made a shitty film, you could still get it out there. I can't help you, and I don't know if anyone's going to buy it. But if you made a good film, it doesn't have to get lost in the shuffle anymore just because you don't know anybody. That's what is so awesome about the next 20 years of this.
Mm-hmm.
Sales agents, you work with them in the global market overseas, and are there counterparts in other countries like Scandinavia, Germany, France, UK, that are doing similar things to you that you guys partner with? In other words, are you working with the international market with North American filmmakers?
I made a $300 phone call this morning to France on my cell phone, like, because it's starting to come into play. Like, foreign sales agents have always, largely disregarded the U.S. market in certain countries because people bought films, didn't pay the bill, and they're like, well, fuck it, we're just not going to sell it there anymore. How many Japanese films get released over here? There are some great Japanese films, but like they're like $1 million upfront. Like, we don't care. They're starting to come around. I think an international sales agent is a very important thing to have, because if we do our job right, people are going to read about your film, not just in the New York Times, but in dozens of papers. The internet is global. That shit's going to get overseas. We want them to buy your film for money in France. Oversimplification of her beauty. This is an American film in English with 2 unnamed African-American stars under the age of 25. Just did a 15 theatrical run in France and made a lot of money. This is a beautiful thing.
It happens to us quite a bit, and what happens is that we have a filmmaker come to us and they say, well, we're going to give you US rights or we're going to give you North American rights, and then the film comes out, and the film has started to do well in the US, and we've been able to get a good momentum going, and we've gotten good press, and they'll say, okay, well, can you do the other territories? Because the great thing about iTunes is that once you've delivered the film one place, you can actually, if you're going to English speaking, you could just turn it on. So we could do Canada, Australia, New Zealand, every place that's English speaking by literally flipping a switch and saying, and your film is available in all those markets. For subtitles, we just get subtitles and we deliver them. It's actually quite easy. But the US, I would say 8 out of 10 times, there are films that we get and we just have North American rights, that because the film has started to gain momentum and because we've frankly done our job, then they say, the filmmaker goes, okay, can we turn on the other territories? And we are seeing more and more working with foreign sales agents because they're seeing that. And so they're coming in, sort of partnering with us on different projects. So it's starting to open the doors a little bit. But with iTunes basically now is pretty much everywhere. And we have deals with like Vodler in Sweden and a couple of Asian territories and things like that are not iTunes. So we can pretty much release your film everywhere internationally.
VHX too?
Yeah, we do tons and tons of global sales.
We did worldwide on Sound City, didn't we?
Yeah, a lot of
And downloaded we're doing.
downloaded is global. Indie Game the
You
Movie
can
was global.
geo-block VHX or
We can. I don't
unblock.
like to,
Yeah.
but we do support it for all these cases where they have sold rights in certain regions, and sort of then we'll just like link to iTunes or something like that, or say just like give us your email address. We'll let you know when they've given up and are making it available. But yeah, we actually are going to publish some numbers about it because we've seen with our films whenever you add subtitles with Bet-Raise Fold, they did this where they released it and then they crowdsourced translations, which Indie Game the Movie did to great success too. And in countries where the subtitles were made available, they saw doubling, tripling, or more of sales. So sort of like an easy win, right? It's like ask people to translate your movie for free.
Right.
And then it's super easy to make available. Like with iTunes, the delivery is a huge pain in the butt. But with us, it's like you upload the SRT file, which is the same thing people get on the Pirate Bay. So it's kind of like it fits into the way consumers are working.
Right, and then people around the world can see the film. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we have films and have Facebook pages and constantly get people going like, so when can we see the film in the UK? And it's like, well,
Exactly.
It's
it's only
crazy.
available right now in Canada, Germany.
And then you've lost that person.
United States, Australia. I'm really sorry. I don't know. You might never be able to see
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, we're looking.
But if you can't answer that question, you've lost that person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe 10 of their friends or 100 of their friends, you have no idea. So, it's something to think about.
Yeah, we have a lot of filmmakers we work with where we just fill all those other gaps. And that's kind of like, I think the mission of our company of VHX is really just to close those gaps between availability and interest. Because there's really nothing more frustrating to me than wanting to pay somebody for something and not being able to do it.
Oh, I didn't mean to snap. I'm sorry. You're right.
Oh, snap. No, that's right.
Let's take some other questions. How about all the way over here?
Thanks. Hi, I'm just wondering if there's any point in having an online holdback anymore. Like when somebody's at your screening and they want to, that's probably when they're thinking they want to buy the film, but you're disqualified or not looked bond-friendly from lots of different places. Like, is there any point, or what's the cost benefit analysis on
I
that?
have to answer that on every film I do, because the way basically I have to decide is it VOD day and date or not is, it makes more sense to be VOD day and date in principle. But if you do VOD day and date, essentially in America, even if we sort of cheat around the 15-city rule, we lose AMC, we lose Cinemark, we lose Regal, and we lose Landmark, because Landmark plays by some different rules. In Canada, we lose Cineplex, because we put films out here, and Cineplex won't take them. Cineplex is big. So is this a film that needs to play in those theaters? And is this a film that will benefit from 3 months of no availability? My answer for most of the time is no. I would much rather have on our website, even if it's not day and date, something like VHX. I'm not trying to sell your company for you.
I love it. I haven't had to say anything.
But I want to be able to I want to pre-order that shit the day the trailer comes out is sort of my goal.
Yep, Dave Grohl did 4 months of pre-orders.
4 months of pre-orders.
It was incredible, and it was because it was like that was the period when the hype was building. It's like, hey, we're going to be releasing
Was
it
he
at
selling
Sundance.
it going into Sundance?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
pre-orderable. It was cheaper.
And he didn't
So
bring
you
it
could
sales.
They kept raising the
pre-order it.
price.
No sales date. We were
4 months in advance.
when we
That's
showed up at
awesome.
Sundance.
Yeah,
we
the
had
minute
50
you
It became
have the-
longer than
we
4
got-
months. Kickstarter's just pre-orders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the minute you have the film,
Sounds
and
like
again,
sounds
it's depending on platform, but iTunes in particular, you can put the film in pre-order for as soon as it's ready.
Yeah, so I have a question.
You make that decision. So we can say, we have a couple of films that are coming out in December, and they're in pre-order now.
Mm-hmm.
This we do not do in Canada. Am I wrong? Does anyone know about pre-ordering a movie here in Canada?
Through crowdsourcing, most definitely.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it's
that,
Nowadays, necessary.
yeah. Like, can I get a show of
but
hands on
that's
who's
the
raised
only
Kickstarter
model,
money?
right? Not VHX, not
No.
Sorry, go.
Oh, I was just curious, like a show of hands, because I've gotten into some interesting conversations with people about Kickstarter backers.
Getting digital downloads. Through
Digital
VHS.
downloads
Yeah.
through but the idea of crowdfunding backers, those are pre-orders, but for some reason a lot of distributors don't really think of them as that.
But
So-
distributors are idiots.
Yeah.
What I want to do with Kickstarter, though, I don't want to make a pre-order. I would rather say you get a copy of the digital, so pre-ordered.
Yeah.
But if you back the film, I think there should be, before anything else, a 3-hour window where you can stream it and see it first.
Yep.
Yep.
Because you backed it, now I want you to talk about it. I want
Yep.
people to see the film and tell other people about it.
Yep.
Holding it back is the opposite of the goal.
Yeah, that's actually something. So we take all these lessons and all the smart things that you say all the time to us,
Oh.
and we're trying to build them into software.
I was talking to a filmmaker about this yesterday, about the whole idea of they want to do their Kickstarter campaign, and it's a great idea. They haven't started yet. They're they were kind of like my dream filmmaker, and even though they haven't even made the film yet, because they were just like, okay, so we want to do a Kickstarter, and we've got this idea. And we want to figure out how we think that we can get all these people to give us money, but we want to give them something really cool, and maybe we give them I'm like, no, why don't you do, if they're so into you and so supportive of you, you want to give them something so that they would be able to, the minute that you can show them the film, they show the film, they tweet about it, they support, and then
Hey,
you
can
go
you
into
turn
a
off your phone?
campaign. So, I think having that sort of preview is a screening basically for your Kickstarter people, and having them talk about it is unbelievably great marketing leverage.
One thing I've consulted on Kickstarter campaigns for pre-production and for distribution and everything in between, and I much prefer to work on the Kickstarter for distribution because the product is almost there and it's ready and it's pre-orders, and I feel it sits better with me.
So you don't like that when it's real early, nebulous.
Yeah.
I've got an idea for a movie. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's a good marketing tool, and I've done it similar to the Zach Braff thing, where it was just to get a percentage of the money, and then it attracted more money, and that's fine. But I don't like to do it. I'm interested in using Kickstarter for creative distribution. I worked on a documentary last year called The Waiting Room that had a great film, didn't get picked up by anyone. He was desperate to release it himself, had no money. We Kickstarted for $85,000. Rachel and Heidi did a very similar thing with Detropia, which played at Sundance. And then we released it using a booker like Dylan and put the team together and put it out. And that film was shortlisted for an Oscar. And that did great things, both for his educational sales and for his career in the long run. And I'm really, really interested in working with filmmakers, truth be told, who are thinking about this. going into their festival premiere. How soon can I kickstart to distribute this film? I don't want to wait till everyone passes on me, and I don't even want to deal with the sales rep. I just want to kickstart to distribute this
You
film.
got a good thing going there.
I know.
wanna
So
talk about it.
we're going to talk more about that, all of us, in the
And
future.
that's
but
what I mean,
like-
Siobhan. Not that people in Canada aren't thinking about Kickstarter for raising money to make a film, but I don't think they're thinking about Kickstarter to raise money to distribute a film. And we do have some other models, like Cineku is coming, but it feels like the conversation here is not at this level, right? Like we all need to start thinking about this in a different way, shape, and form. Go ahead.
If I'm listening to you guys talk about the 18-person team, I have a film coming out. Thank you. I was just listening to you guys talking about assembling the 18-person team. I have a small Canadian theatrical distributor that is a large sales agent that has moved into theatrical. It's Cinema Vault, and so they picked up the film, and we have some telefilm marketing money, not a lot at all, and some from the distributor, but they really have only one person that's a dedicated theatrical person in-house. They have a couple of marketing people, but they're really focused on the international market. So I'm trying to I'm trying to do oversight on stuff. So 2 questions quickly. One, what should I be most worried about? And second of all, specifically to do with the VOD question, because we're deciding this right now, is that if we want to come out in Cineplex, which we're being urged to, then we can't do the day and date. So 2 questions. The big monsters in the closet, and
You can't answer without seeing the film.
Yeah.
Sure.
But you got to be honest with yourself. This is a tough one. And I have released a film for Cinevault way in the past, 5 years ago when Miss Stern was there. Here's the thing. Can you honestly look at your film and say, if you say it's a small film, I haven't seen it, I have no idea what your film is. You didn't. Okay, well, let's say it's a giant film. If it's not, can you look at the film and say, like, does this need to play 70 theaters all on the same day?
No.
Is it an art house film that needs to play one at a time and have its handheld?
It's in between. It depends on the market.
So it's an in-betweener. Most films
are.
are.
It's a guy who's famous in British Columbia and has some fame across Canada.
Okay, so well, I mean, it's more of a rhetorical question. Like, you have to sort of make a call here, and that call is going to be: is a massive wide release in Cineplex, which is it's the AMC of Canada. It's huge. It bought all the other chains. They're good people. They play a lot of my kung fu movies. It's great. Is it better to play there, or is it better to play here? Because Van City will take the film, and the TIFF Lightbox will take the film, and the Bloor will take the film, and the Cinema du Parc will take the film, and the theater in Ottawa that I forget the name of, the Mayfair will take the film.
Yeah.
The Rio will take the film. I love that lady. Is that what's best for your film, and then to have it available everywhere, or is it better to have it all at once? You have to answer it now, but that's the question you're asking.
But the
and it's
tip
the
that
question you
just
have to
tipped me
answer.
off to say that you would probably be, and again, I haven't seen the film, is that you just said he's famous across Canada. So famous across Canada, to me, says that you want to have as many eyeballs on it as humanly possible, which would mean that you need to spend your time on marketing the VOD, because the access to the VOD is going to be greater than the access to the theater. That's just that, and that's without seeing your film or knowing anything.
Yeah.
But when you say things like famous across Canada, or like lots of people will know who this person is, are you? I mean, again, it's that decision. Is it? Do you want to be in 70 theaters across the nation, or do you want to have have your audience have the flexibility to be able to see it in the comfort of their own home, and spend that 3-person marketing team is probably best served doing that as opposed to your 1-person theatrical.
Yeah.
That's my.
The other questions I would ask are, has Cineplex seen it? Can your distributor get a read from them on it? Do they give a shit about it? Because if they don't, then there's your answer, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing is because Cinema Vault doesn't have a huge presence or history in this particular marketplace, are they open to working with another company like these guys?
That's what I'm thinking.
Right? And can you talk to them about partnering? Because they probably don't have the staff or the experience in this market to do what a lot of these guys could do. And could you talk to them about that? because again, I haven't seen your film either, but you need to whoever is placing the film and talking to Cineplex get a read and an honest read and be frank with you about it.
Yeah, they should be able to say to you, look, we think it's going to make X amount of dollars.
And you might not agree with them, but then you got to
Yeah.
ask yourself the resource question.
Yeah.
Let's say you're going to play 50 Cineplexes. Well, they converted to digital. At minimum, with no advertising, you're looking at an $800 virtual print fee times, 50 theaters? You do the math on that. That's 40 grand just to play on the projector. No marketing whatsoever. Cinevault going to put 40 grand into that on top of that? Then you already answered your question. There's
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
no way you can afford to do that.
So I have a geek question. Like, what does the geographic traffic to your website look like? If you're asking about why, this is probably a rhetorical question, but it's sort of like there's a lot of ways of actually gauging sort of the demand for something, and that's something that Indie Game, the movie, used going into their Sundance run. Like they did 2 Kickstarters, by the way. They did one during, I want to say pre-production, maybe, possibly just during production, and then they did like a finishing fund for distribution, and that was a lot like. That was great for the money and for the backers and sort of the audience that was there for the film, but it was also great because it was a way of gauging demand. They were able to look at the Kickstarter the same way that we operate, turns over all the data about your customers and tries to inform you about what your customers look like, and said, oh, look, these people are not just in Canada where you're from. It's all over the world. It's expats all over the world. And so that's what sort of helped inform their decision when they went to Sundance to not go with a traditional distributor. Was they looked at it and they said, we already have 20,000 people who've given us money, or 10,000 people who've given us money, and then we have all these other people that we've seen. Just the traffic from our website is all over the world. And then even if and this is why it hasn't come up in this panel, but we really advocate that people start this process of audience building as early as humanly possible, because just for the data, and for collecting email addresses, something as simple as that. It's a home for your trailer. It takes a long time to get into Google search results, but it's like if somebody Googles your movie and they land on IMDb. IMDb is the worst website. Oh, yeah. Once again, the most popular websites are always the worst websites, and they look terrible.
We were talking about Reddit before the panel.
Yeah, Reddit.
Because it's like the ugliest
How these
website ever.
amazingly successful websites really look like crap.
It's fine. It speaks to their value.
Yeah.
It goes beyond, I guess, the look and feel, but I digress. And so this audience building thing, for me, it becomes as much about sentiment and engaging and giving you leverage in these conversations, because you could say, I have, everybody's in Vancouver, Everybody who's interested in my movie is here in BC.
We pick our Kickstarter projects very selectively because there's so much work that they knock one of our staff people out for an entire month. Like, that's all that they are doing. So we pick them very carefully because that's a lot of business to lose. But we took a meeting with someone early on, and they said, we put up a PayPal link on our website, and within 4 days, we'd gotten $10,000. And we didn't even announce that the PayPal link was up there. And I was like, cha-ching. But it's like, that's a Kickstarter project, and that could happen at any stage for that film. It's like you have to hear those cues and evaluate the little tidbits you're getting. There's a documentary in production right now called Do I Sound Gay? And they have a good Facebook page up. And they put $10 up on Facebook ads because they were just curious to test the waters with Facebook ads. And I think in a month they got 3,000 new likes because that's where the people are, and they were responding to the ads that they made. So that's a good place to continue to invest the money and continue to do some passive audience engagement and put some links up every now and then.
For not a lot of money.
Almost no money.
You could really do all of your sort of market research. If you're, again, to your point that this person is famous across Canada, you can spend a couple, $100 and really see that.
Oh, you don't need to spend any money at all.
Or don't spend any money at all. But
there's this thing called Google Search Trends, which is it saved my life. It's changed my life, where you can see the search traffic and the geographic breakout of search terms. So you could just put the guy's name in and be here's where people look for him, which is indicative of purchase intent, which is
I see a lot of people freaking out.
Yeah.
So cool. There's the internet.
We're going to
is
take
so
some
cool.
more questions. I think one thing that I think is a key challenge for us here in Canada on the cusp of this huge change we're about to go through is that a lot of the funding that we can leverage here is triggered by having a theatrical distributor attached or a broadcast license. That's how you get tax credits. That's how above a certain level, Telefilm recently changed their rules, so below a certain level, you didn't have to have, budget level, you didn't have to have a theatrical distributor. But that's partly why I think here in Canada, we've been stuck in this more traditional model and less able to innovate our way out of it. But we have to start doing that and have to start changing. Like, we still have to deliver 35 millimeter prints to Archives Canada if we get money from Telefilm. And it gets shipped to a vault.
Who's
and it's
working on
stored.
lobbying these guys? Like that are like,
Well, they're
have you
in
heard
the-
about
they're
Netflix?
in the-
Have you heard about?
No, they know about that stuff, and there's people, but that's
It
just
takes
the
a lot. It's
system.
what's happened in
it's
it's
systemic,
happening in
right?
the UK in the same way. It's because it's all about government money, and everybody and I used to work with British filmmakers all the time, and the first thing I'm saying, you guys are freaking lazy. Because people are giving you money, and you think that you don't have to do anything because they're giving you a marketing credit, but you actually have to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So I think getting money from government subsidies is awesome, and it helps you to make films, but it also makes you a little lazy because
Are we
you
frickin'
get
lazy?
comfortable. You get comfortable in a space and be like, oh well, I don't have to think about that because these are what the rules are.
Right.
If you have to be scrappy, it makes you kind of think outside of the box because you only have a certain amount of money. You know that you're gonna have to pay your mortgage in another 2 months, and you've got to figure something out.
Yeah.
And there's no support from the
There's-
U.S. government
At all.
at all.
Yeah, maybe
At
that's
all.
why these companies are in the U.S.
But that's why we're here. I mean, that's why we're born out of a sense of desperation from filmmakers who, since the '80s, have been told to go piss off by the government. Like, they're struggling to, pay
Yeah,
for
I
National
mean-
Parks Day. I don't even know if we can get back in the country on Thursday. Like,
But even, but as I saw today or yesterday, even, my lovely Brett's, even the British Film Institute, which is the stodgiest of stodgy organizations, is now putting their films available on VOD. Which sounds like not a big deal, but it is a huge deal because it is all about the film and preserving the archive and all of those things. And now they are starting a whole VOD system. So I think, again, tides are turning, but it's slowly.
Yeah, and that is happening with the CMF and Telefilm, of trying to
'Cause
put
you
as
have
much
to.
Canadian content, just actually not even on VOD, I think just online. But of course, being met with lots of resistance. Let's take a question at the back. Thanks for your patience.
Please wait for the microphone.
Yeah, thanks, waiting.
Thank
for
you.
the microphone or the orders.
Used to being an actor, so I can deliver the voice. I think there's a stigma that has long lasted, and maybe we still have it in Canada, of the old idea if you made not a good film, it was direct to video, right? It was direct to, it would never get theatrical because it wasn't good. And so the psychological turnover of making video as quickly as possible and getting it to Netflix and things like that, the paradigm is a big shift psychologically for the industry and the people who make films. And so the idea is you want it to be in a theater because it legitimizes it. And then the other thing is that but if you make a sale and you get it to TV or a network, I just made a film and the CBC bought it. And now it's changed how everything else any other distributors will have it because the CBC owns it for a year. But you jump at that because it's a chance for exposure on a huge level. And I think that getting this mindset in Canada around that to get it out on a different platform, which is what you do, it's a huge shift that has to take place from the filmmakers at the lowest, the base level, where we make the films. And the distributors will change when they start seeing us doing it ourselves. It's what's happened in music, same thing.
Yeah.
And
To that point, it's very hard to pitch this idea of like VOD, day and date, multiple platforms all at once to a first-time filmmaker who still has that starry eyes about getting a theatrical release and got into Sundance and thinks they're going to be the next Beast of the Southern Wild. It's very hard to make this case that Dylan made, but it's easier sometimes to work with the filmmakers who've been through it and who've had the traditional distribution and who are either they haven't made any money up from it or they're sick and tired of it or there's something clunky about it and they are interested in trying new things. So they're opting to do this now. It's not even their plan B anymore.
Yeah.
And
I think money talks as well. To be very base about it. In the last, I guess it was a year and a half ago, there was a film in the U.S. called Bachelorette, which Radius put out. And Kirsten Dunst in the U.S. is VOD gold, and that is it. And people always used to joke about it, but it actually seems to be true. So because every film that she's on that goes to VOD makes a crap load of money. And I think that Bachelorette really kind of changed the tide in a very quick way in the U.S. because you could now associate, not only was it the idea that this film was going to be able to be out to lots and lots of people, and not only did it have, it was very similar in title and in poster to a very, very successful film that had come out quite recently before that called The Bridesmaids. So put those two things together, plus Kirsten Dunst, and then get that film out there and do an exclusive with iTunes. That film made a lot of money. People then started to be like, oh, this VOD thing, not such a bad thing. Maybe we should do this. Maybe we could do these VOD exclusives. There are companies over the last month alone that have now started to make deals with VOD platforms where they're doing exclusives. We do it too. We did it with a film called Rewind This, where it's a documentary about people who still collect VHS. We're doing it with VHX, not to be confused, where we did a 2-week exclusive on iTunes because it's like we're fishing where the fish are. We had lots of people come to iTunes. The iTunes promotes the film. That film, had a very, 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 very small theatrical, but it was really about VOD driving. I think the conversation around what it means to go direct to video has changed dramatically in the U.S.
Yeah.
But it's only happened recently. So don't feel bad that it's not happening here yet. It's just, it's really only started to happen in a real tangible way over the last year and a half.
I think even, in the last 12 months, we had Shane Carruth, and we had Indie Game the Movie, and we had Sound City, and those are really prime examples of what's coming, but that's just in the last 12 months. So, you're not
Well,
that,
then
you're not
look
far
at
behind.
Kickstarter. I mean, Kickstarter is the
Right.
development pipeline for next year's releases, and they're people that we're aggressively going after in terms of providing software features that cater to this audience that they're building, which is like Zach Braff has this kind of private community site for everybody who's backed the project where he's issuing updates, and some of it's public, but a lot of it is private. And so it's
And
something
you're
we want
facilitating.
to. Yeah, we want to. Well, we're not doing Zach Braff, unfortunately, but it's that's
Someone is,
going to be part of the VHX platform. Is sort of this idea that's like people are participating in the process. They're part of the process. So when the movie launches, maybe he'll make millions and millions of dollars. Maybe he'll put it on VOD and make even more. But
And when we're looking for films now, we're not doing what we did 5 years ago, which was see what got into Sundance, and going there and calling. We have a guy full-time trolling Kickstarter. We're looking to see what's in it's a film intelligence
Can I
officer.
have that job?
No, you may not. You can share the data though. Like, this guy's job, he's my
public.
development guy. Like, we're going to reach out to filmmakers when they're on Kickstarter and say, hey, this looks interesting, tell me more.
Yep.
Because we want to do the Sound City model again. When we took Sound City to Sundance, we didn't know if we were getting in until November. It was one of the last films picked. Whereas Shane's was one of the first. He knew in August he was getting into Sundance. He had time to set it up. Sound City found out on November 28th. They were the last film picked. They were getting into Sundance.
That's crazy.
On November 15th, I had 51 theaters booked 10 days after Sundance. We were going to get in, go loud, and then go to theaters, or we were going to not get in, go to Sundance, put the Foo Fighters on a flatbed truck, drive through Main Street till we got kicked out, and then put the film out.
Yep.
But this model is important because festivals traditionally have been used as a sales platform launch. But that's ridiculous to say, hey world, I'm at Sundance, here's my film, except by hey world you mean hey sales guys and buyers.
Right.
And then you shut up for 8 months, and then you come back, hey, no, now here's the film. Like,
Right.
the public doesn't care what's at Sundance. But if you can find a way to make them, all of a sudden, you can be the star at Sundance. This film is available in 5 days. Here's our festival debut. 5 days later, you can watch it in your living room, in 20 theaters. You know,
Yeah.
it's a mix and match. So it doesn't have to be a stigma to go direct to video, because you're not going direct to video. It's not at the dollar bin at Walmart. There are films on iTunes and your cable that are those films, but they're going to fall to the bottom as curation takes over.
Yep.
You're still getting a theatrical. You're still on demand. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a different way of thinking. I always feel bad kind of saying this like audience building pitch sometimes in a film festival room, because you guys have movies that you're trying to sell today, right? And it does require this 5-year, 20-year perspective, but you can draw a straight line between the music industry and the film industry on this, which is the days of the monster record deal and them doing all the work for you are gone. The same thing is happening in film. That means that the band needs to start touring more and be active on MySpace or whatever comes to replace it, and sort of like building that audience themselves because they own that audience and they can carry that audience from release to release. And that's kind of something that in the film world, you're just reinventing the wheel each time.
Let's take another question in the back.
Hi, you seem to be talking about Kickstarter a lot, and a lot of people here use Indiegogo. Does Indiegogo have the same effect, or for marketing, should it be Kickstarter?
I think that's mostly just because they can't pay people in Canada, Kickstarter?
They
can
Oh,
now.
they can?
As of, yeah.
Sorry, Jamie, I'm just going to say that Kickstarter is coming to the forum on Saturday. They've just opened for business in Canada 2 months ago.
So ask all your Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Ask all your Kickstarter questions then from the.
Yeah, it's cool. And then actually I saw some really interesting data about the success and strength of Kickstarter projects versus Indiegogo projects. And Kickstarter just outperforms them, and that I could talk for a very long time about why that is. I don't think that anybody's choosing Indiegogo because it's 1% less than Kickstarter. It's a fantastic, crowdfunding in general is the way to go. You're asking your fans to like commit to you with their dollars, you know, and that's like, I like to think of that as like the greatest expression of fandom is giving you money.
Hell yeah.
You know, like tweeting about it is great, but like giving me money is even better. Doing both is the best.
Doing both is the best. I was going to say, both is the best.
Another question there in the back.
It seems that you specialize in films that are already produced and already made. If we're just starting out on a project now, are there things we should take into considerations and things we should avoid at all cost as we're just beginning this process now?
Avoid at all costs.
Is it a narrative or a doc?
Yeah.
Okay. My tip on outreach is, because it can be daunting, set aside like 30 minutes to 60 minutes a week to research potential partners anywhere, in any territory. Just so that you're having an ongoing list and you're having that conversation with yourself about who your audience is and where they are and how you can reach them. And I think that's very manageable.
I think that helps. Sorry to interrupt, but that is something that you could also. It's great for if you're going to do DIY, but it's also great for you to hand to a distributor.
Yeah, exactly.
And say, here, I have this all. You know, if they're on the fence about the film and they're like, well, we're not really sure how we're going to market it, and ooh, is there really an audience? You can show up with your data and be like, actually, there is an audience. Here's how many people like my film on Facebook. Here's how many partners I have and how many people are on their mailing list. You know, having that information is golden for a distributor. So it's great for you to, it helps you then make the decision about whether or not you're going to do it on your own, you're going to do it with others, how you're going to do it, knowing your audience base.
Yeah, it gives you a tremendous amount of leverage in those conversations. I think, Dylan, your point about like when they come in, they need to have some kind of marketable attribute. Saying I have 10,000 email addresses is a fantastic marketable attribute.
Yeah.
And saying I have $10,000 in pre-orders too, or all these backers on Kickstarter, or here I have all of this data about, my website's just been sitting there, like collecting my Instagram feed for a year, but it's the top result for the film. It's getting some interest. Like, you should set up, I mean, that's the idea of VHX is like, when you come up with the idea for the movie and we kind of pick a title, you should buy the domain name immediately. You should sign up for VHX and publish the site today. It says coming soon. All it'll do is say coming soon, but you can just keep adding to it as you start to get more and more things together.
I have a question for you guys about that, though. Do you think you can start that too early? Because I've had the experience of, if we go back to this example of Daydream Nation, where we had a website that was promoting, and this website is now defunct, but at the time, they made these daily videos that they shot on set and published them and developed like quite a big following. But then that was in production, and then it takes 9 months to finish the film, and then we had to premiere at Toronto, and so it was like a year and a half from that initial time, and people are impatient. They don't want to wait. They don't want to wait that year and a half. So I was like, now with this film we're doing now, which is a much bigger title, we're actually holding all that. We decided not to do that and not to start. Simon Pegg has 3.5 million Twitter followers. We didn't want him to start tweeting about the film in March and April because it's going to be too long.
Well, that's why you need to think about it, and you have to have a plan.
Yeah.
So just like throwing shit out there is not useful to anybody. So I think, putting those videos for Daydream Nation were probably great, but probably it was too early to have them out without actually having what your distribution plan was going to be.
Now, you need to backtrack, At some point, you're going to figure out whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're doing it with other people. You're going to have a line that goes back from your release date. No one really cares, except for your Kickstarter backers, that your film is being produced. So you need to backtrack like, okay, well, 5 months early, we know we have this amount of content. We know this content is good. We can start putting it out and raising awareness leading up to something. Which
That's why I say just start the research. I mean, it's
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah, I
having
mean,
it in your brain. You're having the conversation with yourself now about what it will look like in a year.
And to avoid, please God, I always say this every panel, one, take good stills, not of you with your arm around the cast, like of what's going on the screen so we can use them. And make sure you don't put anything stupid on the internet, because one of the things that narrative doc, VOD or not VOD, that comes up over and over again is, oh, the filmmakers made a 4.5-minute trailer leading up to their festival. No matter what I do, I can never get rid of that. Like that, if it's been out long enough, will be the thing that comes up when people search for it. And it looks terrible, and the sound isn't right, and you haven't done your color correction yet, and it's kind of shitty, and it's like 3.5 minutes too long. Like, be really careful, because that's going to follow you. It's stapled to your resume. It's like putting nude pictures up. Never going to go away. It's going to follow your film. Please be careful.
Can I just say, to put a just bow on that, a trailer is not 4 minutes long. Okay?
Ever.
It is not, if it's 4 minutes long, it is not a trailer. Thank you.
Drop the mic.
Not a trailer.
I'm actually an animator trying to make animated films, and I started with making comic books so I can pick up fan base to push my idea, or this avant-garde idea that cannot have any fan base right now. But it's still, it's actually, when I released it, I picked up about 2,000 Facebook likes, and it's been picking up a lot on the internet. And I've had to release motion comics and short videos and short films out of this concept or whatever. And it's turned to be, it's become something that's actually free, and people are always like asking about it, but I'm not really sure how to take it from that free level into the next level of making it either a feature film, a TV series, or something like that, and actually using Kickstarter and these things after I've actually released certain videos, or parts of it that is going to kind of affect it.
So is your question kind of about like people have seen the finished product?
Well, it's a comic book, so
It's a comic book.
So there is a progression of
So it sounds like
create
you'll
it.
have like 1,000 backers, no
Yeah,
problem.
you're ready.
Right?
Yeah.
It sounds like you're good to go.
I still didn't do a Kickstarter.
Yeah. Just do one.
campaign.
Well, you should do one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it fails, you can still do another one.
You
Yeah.
like this? I'm about to do this thing that's incredibly bigger. I
Yeah.
need some money to do it. You like this? This is going to be this times more awesome.
Yeah.
Help.
Plus,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
get
You've
the
got
film-
content to get to entice people, so
Oh, yeah.
and clearly you've got fans already. So it seems like right now is the perfect time to do it.
Right, you're not an unknown. You
It
actually.
doesn't affect that it was actually a free thing, and then like let's
No,
say
it's
new fans or
No,
something.
it's,
No,
like
it's
that.
still
way
free.
better.
It's fine. It's great.
That's
What they're
cooler.
saying is leverage what you have, which is content that you can show people, which a lot of filmmakers don't. They might only have a script, but you have actually visual content that people can see.
And you have a fan base.
And you have fans.
You're
so
good.
they're
Yeah.
saying, give her,
Then
go
when,
for
then when
it.
you release
Yeah.
the real
Use
deal.
it to make
Use
something
it.
bigger.
Yeah,
And
when
I would also say do some research on who right now is releasing motion graphic films, because that is I'm saying it now, it is the next big thing. I mean, it is the thing that everybody's going to be talking about in a year from now.
You can
So-
also be really transparent in your Kickstarter video and just be real. Like, hey, you guys are awesome and you've been supporting me making this for free for a long time, but now I want to do something awesome and I also need to make a living at this. So like, let's do this together, and they'll appreciate that. And you'll see that when you do your research and look at other Kickstarter videos.
And don't say the phrase, I just learned about Kickstarter last week.
No, I've learned about it a long time ago, but it did not feel at the beginning. It did not feel like it was the right thing. I just.
Yeah. No,
It
I mean,
felt like I
as-
needed something, as you were saying. You need the Kickstarter for distribution. It felt like Kickstarter needed, that. For some reason, the big projects that make a lot of money on Kickstarter are not really people that just came up and, hey, let me look at my cartoon or look at my movie
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
They're actually backed up by production companies and producers and like people that are actually working in the
I
totally
did a
disagree with
campaign
that
that raised
sentiment.
$250,000, and I'm not a hotshot producer.
Yeah.
Oh.
We worked. We made it look presentable and beautiful, and that's doable because it's a very user-friendly platform.
Don't look at Spike Lee and Zach Braff. That's
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
those
just
are
the-
outliers. I
Yeah.
wouldn't look at those guys
Yeah,
as...
we just distributed this movie called The Gamers, Hands of Fate, which is like a narrative about collectible card games that raised $400,000 on Kickstarter last year. They got
collectible card games.
collectible card games. It's awesome.
$400,000.
Yeah, I know this guy Brad O'Farrell who
Crazy.
raised $350,000 for
Crazy.
his card game, and then comics do super well too. People love comics on Kickstarter. And, I mean, so James and Lisanne from the Indie Game the Movie are like big inspirations for me, and I reference them all the time. And one of the things they swear by is this mantra of think like a fan. And like, if you just put yourselves in your fans' shoes and say, oh, I really like all this stuff that this guy's making, I want him to make more, right? It's as easy as that.
I want to take that because we only have a few minutes left and talk about the future. So I'm getting heavy on the Kickstarter in the future. Where are we going from here? Where is all this going as far as you guys can see? What's going to happen in the next 5 years in terms of indie distribution? Anyone? Take a crack?
Curation.
It's all going
Power
to
to
be
the
correct. It's
people.
about
Power.
curation.
Ted Hope, curation.
Curation. Well, what do you mean? But when you say curation, what do you mean?
What I mean is not like gatekeepers. I mean like a way, and this is actually something the music industry hasn't really done very well with, a way for people to do that psychological thing that everyone wants to say is like, I've seen something amazing. I know you haven't seen it yet, but I can help show it to you. Like, that's not all famous people doing it. It's you doing it to your friends. It's platforms that allow you to bring something awesome and show it to other people. Like, when we're trying to force it now. Like, if you buy a film from VHX, we want to give you 3 download codes. 1 for you,
Yep.
2 to give to your friends. Like,
Right.
we also want Dave Grohl's top 10 list of films and a link to click and either buy them directly from the filmmaker or, you know, some sort of promotion. Like,
Yeah.
getting away from trying to get into folders on Comcast and getting into like people, hey, you like my shit, I like this other shit, you're gonna like this shit.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. If you look at the web, the primary drivers of traffic are Facebook, Twitter, and then for us, it's Reddit in that order. And it's kind of like, those are completely user-generated. That is just your fans speaking up about what they like. And what helps is when it's coming from you and you just say, if you like this, please retweet it.
I mean, it's all about recommendation. And you can see that in, you know, the idea that there are basically no film critics left in the U.S. Because it used to be that people used to read the New York Times Review and that would tell them what they were going to go see that weekend. That is not the case. People, I don't know who reads the New York Times film reviews anymore. I actually don't, and I used, that was
The
what I used,
Academy
the Academy,
again.
but maybe the Academy. I mean,
Folks
those
over
are
40.
probably like the last people that are reading, and then they're all going to die soon, so it'll be fun. So I think it's all about curation and about trust in that curation, because it's one thing to say, I think this film is cool, but if you don't really give a shit about what I'm saying or who I am or anything, then it doesn't really mean anything. So I
Yeah.
think it's about trusting your, not to use a Google term, but your circle of people and giving, and then providing, so it's about providing access to that content and that interesting content, not the content that they're seeing on a billboard on Sunset Boulevard or that TV people are talking about, but interesting, innovative, niche content, and then giving people access to it, and then letting those people share it with people that they that they trust. And so I think it's all about, you know, we find out about what's cool or what's good or from our friends. And whereas we used to back in the day, you used to have dinner with them all the time. Now you tweet at them or you Facebook them or whatever it is the kids do now, or Reddit them. But the same principle is still there. You're finding out you're my friend and you're telling me, hey, I saw this really cool movie, you should check it out. And you know, what these guys are talking about is not only did I see this really cool movie, you should check it out. Here, I'm going to give you the mechanism to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it brings me back to the music analogy and Napster. I've been thinking a lot about this concept of the mixtape. And there were those people who made really good mixtapes. And that's how you learned about music, because they would either make like a classic one or they would put all this new music on it. And that's how you learned. And I miss that, right? Because, you know, there's various ways, SoundCloud, all the different ways to find out about music or films. But in a way, it's that same sort of concept that you rely on a friend and go like, hey, I made this for you, right?
I love the new. I'm now like my new favorite thing is Spotify, in that their new interface where you're listening to something, and then on my little feed will be, hey, you listen to this. This is actually you might like this person. I have discovered more new music through just the use of that new interface than I have in years. Because I'm listening to something and they know that I like this, and they're like, oh, you might like this person, and I found out about new artists. And not only are they telling me about they're saying you might like this person, but they're also telling me that this other person that I like is actually going to be playing a show in New York next week.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think if we could take lessons from a film perspective, if we could take those lessons from the music industry, I think that's where we will be, hopefully, in the next 5 years.
So what's the best example of that, though, right now that we have for film? Is it Netflix who says you like this?
Well, this is exactly what we're trying to build with VHX.
Yeah,
As a
I mean,
replacement
I don't think
for
it
this.
exists
You don't think it
yet.
exists
No, because
yet?
all the current marketplace solutions are garbage, if you ask me. I mean, they're really, iTunes is probably the worst social implementation of all time. Netflix's old social features were much better than what they have with this Facebook stuff going on. And I think it's really interesting you guys are using the word curation too. Like, I talk a lot about discovery, and curation is sort of one avenue for that, because as much as I've been talking about sort of user-generated discovery, like from your friends on Twitter or Facebook, like, I'm also really curious what Film Buff is releasing and what Variance is releasing, because you guys are really picky, and what Variety is reviewing, and the New York Times. Like, there's a lot of different inputs for how people discover things. And in the iTunes world, the way you discover things is by loading the front page and picking one of them.
You look at the charts.
Look at the
in charts, like, and that's just not how these things happen anymore. And so really, like, what we're trying to build with VHX is a more idealized platform for that. And the way that starts is by everybody having their own store and having their own presence on the web. And everything is actually sharing like a common technology core and a common user base, which means that if you're on Indie Game the Movie and you buy Indie Game the Movie or Sound City, it might say, programmatically it might recommend things to you. I'm actually much less interested in algorithmic and programmatic solutions than I am with Sound City saying, here's 3 other movies that we liked, or here's other Variance movies that we liked, and then maybe we like sell them all together.
What we're doing with social media right now is we're scrapping almost everything. Our social media is basically me on Twitter talking about shit that has nothing to do with film. Like, what we're basically building is, we've got it ready to launch out, is we've gone to all the filmmakers we've worked with and said, we want you to just write a paragraph about a movie you've seen recently that you liked. And so on our Tumblr, it's basically going to be Spike Lee recommending something and Dave Grohl recommending something, as well as Terrence recommending something with a link of the most effective way to buy it that's good for the filmmaker.
In my dream world, they get a cut of the sale.
Yes.
My man.
There's a lot of people who drive traffic who should get a cut.
Yeah. That's the part, if it's not a Variance film, I cannot spend Sony's money for them. But referral links to Amazon, like, I think that would be fantastic.
I mean, that's what we've just started, we've been doing on our site, because because of this curation thing, which is so important, and because for us, it's all about the relationship with filmmakers. So we do these filmmaker collections. So we have so every film gets on the site as they normally, and they get a film page, and this is what the film's about. And we, instead of we have a synopsis, but we also have why we think it's Film Buff. So not only is it, here's the synopsis and here's what the film is about, but for every film that's on our site, we write why we think it's a great film. So it's about the curation. So then we take that filmmaker, and then that filmmaker does a 5-film collection of films that inspired either the movie or just films that inspire them. So it could be new films, it could be old films, it could be, so we had a filmmaker who made a film, a romantic comedy that was set in New York, and he wrote about 5 films that inspired him, Manhattan, that were New York movies. And it's all in their own voice, and then we click, then you could, you're like, oh my God, I haven't seen Manhattan forever. You click to it, and it goes to wherever the film is available. But I think that it goes back to that whole idea of making it so that there's a holistic view and a holistic way for people to know more about the films and filmmakers.
That's the challenge, though, because it's not self-serving. Like,
No.
you're not going to get $1 off Manhattan
No.
because someone else owns that.
Sadly, no.
So there needs to be some sort of centralized platform that's just for the good and the welfare, which is a hard sell to your investors, because you're not going to go to the Variance site to see what I recommend you see. I mean, I'm tweeting about After Tiller half the time.
Yeah.
That's not my film, but you're not going to follow me to hear about, what films I want. It has to be in a central place. It has to be grouped, and the public has to be able to participate too.
Yep.
Because what makes this into a more democratic thing is, yeah, you've got your Dave Grohls and your Spike Lees, but you also have people, the public, that people keep clicking on. Like, this guy's really smart, and he gets up there with it. Like, that's what makes it something that everyone wants to participate in.
So I think the answer is we're trying to build it. We're building it right here.
You guys should get together and do it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
we're working
crazy
on
to
it.
think about things like I didn't really even think about it with iTunes that they're so not tapping into. I would love to see what all my friends are downloading.
Oh my, it's horrible.
It's
They
so
added a
stupid,
Facebook like
right?
button last year.
Yeah.
You know.
So you guys should build it. We're out of time, so I hope you guys all. For me, this was really stimulating. It made me think about what I do and how I could do what I do differently. I hope it was for you guys. I just want to thank all of you so much, and it's inspiring. I hope you all get together and build it because we need
Yeah,
it.
and can I just say too, on behalf of the forum, this is a lot of love and research went into building this panel of people in particular. It was months in the making, and it was just a really happy, excellent accident that you ended up, you worked together already. I hope that you guys have really enjoyed having these folks here, and I hope that everything that we've been talking about today spreads like an infection through Canada.
A nice infection.
A
Good
nice
infection.
infection, and one you don't ever want to lose. So thank you so much to Trish, Julie, Jamie, Sarah, and Dylan. Give it up for them. Thank you. And thanks, Creative BC.